All right. Hello world. Although am I not being shown? Wait. Yep, here we are. Hello world. Um, I thought I would come back for another stream. I'm building the skill, so pretty casual. I'm not expecting too much of myself. Stick around if you're interested and if you're here. But yeah, context is I like PF Jung as a person, as like a personality online. I wouldn't say I probably align myself typically more with Destiny than with PF Jung in terms of perspective. But I think that PF Young, that Paul has a lot to bring to the table, and I'm interested in what he brings, and I'm interested in him as like a individual and a person as well. So here we go. Um, let's do this.
Do you think Joe Rogan is right wing? Would you agree with that statement?
It's an interesting one. So I think that you know, um, it's. I think at the end of the day, a lot of what he does probably functionally helps the right wing more than the left. He probably has more right-wing friends, I would imagine, than left, but I don't know that for sure. But I also think that the political spectrum, like when you go from like right to left wing, it's not just one spectrum, right? Like there's maybe hundreds of different topics that could inform that somebody might have an association with being either left wing or right wing, and you could be like left on some issues and then right on some issue on other issues, right? And so typically, what I think people are asking when they ask somebody's left or right wing, it's um, what sort of suite or cluster of beliefs does this person have? And then maybe there are some beliefs where your opinion matters more than others. So it's sort of like it's an average of all the different beliefs and where you stand on them, left versus right. It's sort of a weighted average um, based on the beliefs that are more important at that political point in time. And so maybe based on that definition, um, Joe Rogan can be more right wing, based on what he chooses to talk about, what he seems to care the most about. But he's not as obviously partisan or anything like that as um, some other political commentators.
The problem, it's a semantic question of like, what does right wing even mean, I guess.
That's true. You could say that.
Yeah. Also, I'm so sorry. When I say semantic question, semantics are incredibly important. I don't think semantics are a,
Oh.
Yeah. But I don't think there's probably not going to be much disagreement on what Joe Rogan's beliefs are. It's going to be a matter of what do we consider right wing. I don't really think that even matters. I don't care. The reality is that he supported the candidate. One of the big advantages that conservative media has over liberal media is every single person in the conservative media sphere, including all of the centrists and everybody else.
I'm going to slow it back down because my computer...
All of them.
My computer is really ordinary, I think. So when I speed it up, it every once in a while it'll just stop because I think streaming at the same time as and I've adjusted my settings to try to improve it, but I think this is where it's at. Streaming at the same time as like watching this video at like 1.5x speed, it seems. Even that's a bit too much for it, so.
Supported Donald Trump for president. And on the left, there's not that same unifying support, and it's a huge problem, I think. It's one of the media landscape things I'm going to be working a lot to fight against or change.
Yeah, I saw that you said you were going to run a ground campaign if you could. That would be pretty interesting. This was the podcast election. I do think that has truth to it, in that old media is pretty much dead. Even they're acknowledging it. And you're certainly on the forefront. Oh, we talked about this last time. You're, for better or worse, you're one of the singular individuals who are, I don't know, most influential in this regard. So
maybe, but I don't think traditional media is dead. I just think that alternative media is fighting for a lot of space now. But, yeah, but I
agree. I don't think traditional media is dead, but it's definitely adapting, and the ones that will survive will be the ones that adapt best.
I know, yeah, it's not the king thing as it was before, maybe, but it's still pretty important, I think.
Oh, I can't even be able to
JJ
5 times speed, so I'm just gonna go down to 1 time speed. Sad. You'll see my resolution here is only like 360 as well, so and I do not want to go 240. So
text me. He's pretty black-pilled right now.
Sure. Wait, I thought. Oh, JJ, never mind. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
JJ, what would you tell JJ to get him out of his new nihilism arc?
I don't know what he's black-pilled over, so depends. There are some things that are worth being.
I don't know that America voted for a fascist. America voted for someone who tried to lead an insurrection.
While that's factually true, it doesn't logically follow that America voted for him because they endorsed that behavior. What's more likely is they voted for him because they don't really care much about that type of stuff, or they're not even really aware of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but um, I mean, I don't know the context behind what JJ has said, but I think he'd probably be aware of that. But he'd be black-pilled, and so the black pill being like sort of like there being a feeling of hopelessness around it because if you do look at the facts, it does seem so clear that this is who Trump is and that this is what he's done, and yet still because of the media environment we live in, or for whatever reason, that uh, the voting pattern that you would think should follow as a result of that did not at all. In fact, the reverse happened. So I can understand like it's sort of like a feeling of hopelessness around that, though. Um, I'm usually fairly optimistic. I don't even know what to think about the situation over there.
Because it's just not on their radar.
That's fair. I would agree with you.
You could argue that it's blackpilling that Americans don't care or that they didn't know about it, but
That's fair. So this is very centrist of you. This is very based because you're moving away from the we have to. He's a threat to
I wonder if Paul is like nervous right now. I wonder if he feels nervous. Um, yeah.
democracy fundamentally. That's what we got to hit on.
I mean, I think he is a threat to democracy fundamentally.
Well, sure.
And I do wish that people cared about that more.
I wish people cared about different things as well. But I guess I'm more. I think you're right. The reality is that people just don't care, and I don't know. I think a lot of it is it's all tribalism. It's not all tribalism because there are independents who would have voted either way. But the mainstay of it is it's just two fundamental different worlds. You've talked about this, right? Some people are in one right-wing echo chamber, fundamentally Fox News or Tucker Carlson and all that, and they're in a completely different world than whoever else, right?
Yeah.
Whatever the left wing.
But I think these worlds have become more and more separated, especially with the internet, unfortunately.
And what do you think the solution is to that?
Changing, I think that
Centrism, maybe building bridges.
Definitely too big of a question for me. Yeah, it's so tough. I wonder if, like, because I think about platforms, and I don't know if Destiny's actually a big form of this platform, but I think about platforms like Ground News, or at least what it seems like they're trying to do, where instead of having a specifically curated list of sources based on what you like and what you spend more view time on, and the videos you watch, or whatever else, the things that you click on, and getting sort of going down whatever political rabbit hole you'll naturally go down by virtue of the sorting algorithm that these social media platforms have. Instead of that, having something like Ground News be widely available, where you can see, oh, okay, this is what these perspectives are saying, and you can get ahead of it, right? So it's like when a news story comes out, immediately oh, this is what the left news source is saying, this is what the right news source is saying, these are the facts on this side, these are the facts this side, this is what the more centrist, middle of the road, less partisan, um, maybe even apolitical news sites talk about. So I wonder if that could help, but I don't know. Maybe even that could be extended out, like that concept could be applied to, because most people aren't getting their news from news articles these days, I don't think, at least, or at least a meaningful portion aren't. So maybe even that concept could be applied to the video environment, like, and because that could be, yeah, I wonder if that could help. It's probably not the only thing, but um, if everybody was more informed of um, uh, what was happening on the other side, I think that would help, because I think that these days a lot of people don't actually watch any content at all, or if they do watch any content or see anything from the other side of the argument, it's because it's been specifically curated for them from their side of the argument. So they're often seeing the weakest arguments, or the arguments that their side has the best counters for, or feel they have the best counters for, at least. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's part of the solution, but I know ground up as well, more education, more critical thinking. Formal logic is a part of school education and emotional management. Maybe because I think a lot of strong knee-jerk reactions and a lot of people's lack of openness towards different ideas comes from a kind of egocentric, or like a fear of being of of your own ego being hurt. Sort of like I think that's where mine comes from. I think that's where everyone's comes from. But those are just some ideas.
No. I think that a huge part is changing the left media sphere. I think the left needs to stop letting the right drive so much of the conversation, and they need to be a bit more grounded in what they believe in, and they need to push and be aggressively fighting more for what they believe in. I think the right has gotten basically complete and total control over the entire media narrative.
I think it's because Kamala Harris was not apparently capable of going on Joe Rogan. Do you think that was a serious mistake?
I mean, I don't know if at the end of the day it mattered. Well, I mean, in terms of her going on Joe Rogan or not, I don't know if that specifically mattered, but maybe it did matter that she didn't feel capable of it. Though I don't know. I've heard different things. Like I've heard that she wanted to do it, but only an hour, and only if he came out to her, that sort of thing. So. But the general point of, maybe she wasn't the most appealing candidate in terms of like her charisma and the widespread appeal of her charisma. That's potentially true. I don't know if there was a better option. Honestly, I don't. And there seemed to be a really big groundswell of support for her right after it became pretty clear that Biden was dropping out. So, yeah. That being said, though, I don't even know. Yeah, so I don't know if another candidate would have beaten Trump because it may have just been a referendum on inflation that at the end of the day was decisive in getting him elected. But also what Destiny said with how well the right wing was at controlling the conversation. Elon Musk bought Twitter, rebranded it X. I think that could have played a role. So
I don't think it would have mattered much one way or the other.
Now that I say that, I don't think it would have tipped the election per se, but it was evidence of something that she's a rehearsed NPC, and Trump, for all his flaws, is at least I can tell when he's lying, right? I can't as easily tell when Kamala or
yeah, I feel like these are like
I
feel like these are third or fourth order issues. I think the more fundamental and important question is why does Kamala Harris need to go on Joe Rogan? I think that's the important question. Why was it that Kamala Harris couldn't win the election unless she went on a podcast that was so avowedly pro-Trump and had been for at least a year?
It was not avowedly pro-Trump.
Absolutely.
It was Trump adjacent. Sure.
I would have bet you $1 trillion. Joe Rogan literally made a tepid statement supporting RFK, and his whole fan base turned on him and was like, "Oh, Laura," and then he was like, "Oh no, I'm not endorsing RFK. I'm not endorsing RFK. I would never do that, guys." Yeah. So no, there's.
But that's different from like Charlie Kirk is a avowed supporter of Trump. If you're going to describe Joe Rogan as an avowed supporter, then what words do we have left to describe Trump and cat turd?
Yeah, I don't know. This is a reality breaking moment. You're delusional if you think there was ever a world where Joe Rogan wasn't going to come out in full support of Donald Trump. Would you agree, for instance, that like probably 80% plus of his fans? I'm not
necessarily disputing that.
Sure,
but there absolutely is a world where if the candidates were different, Joe Rogan could have supported, some left-wing populists. Bernie Sanders is probably too old. That Charlie Kirk would not have supported. Joe Rogan and Charlie Kirk are fundamentally separate enough where they didn't have to.
Yeah, but we're not in that world. We're in the world where he supported the right-wing candidate, and he had been bringing on people that were supportive of the right-wing candidate, and he had been heading in that direction for a year or more. So then the question is, why is it that in order to win the election, why did Kamala need to go on that platform? Why was that so important? Something is already severely broken there.
I'm a little confused because Destiny is saying, why was it so important for her to go on this platform because something is already broken there. But I thought they already both acknowledged that it probably wasn't. It wasn't going to tip the election for her to go on that platform or not. So I'm not fully tracking how Destiny's point here relates to his underlying hypothesis, but I mean, I might agree with the broader point, even still, that there's something about the media environment itself that's broken. It's just like, it's not just Joe Rogan, of course. But yeah, so I don't know what to do about it.
You're talking about an incumbent, essentially, or at least the vice president of the incumbent. Why does she need to be going on disfavorable media to beat a guy who already lost the last election? that like something is not working there, right? Something is fundamentally broken. So to try to break it down to like, well, she would have went on Joe Rogan, she would have been more like, I think something's already messed up. That's why I'm fighting
To the
against that.
degree, fair enough. And I do think there's something to be said about organized media activity on the right wing. Like they're pretty good about that. To what degree does the left bear any responsibility in this, do you think?
Hmm. I mean, I followed the American election a little bit. For anyone who doesn't know, I'm Australian, so I am. I probably didn't have my finger on the pulse as much as I could have, as much as I would have if I was American. But of course, I think the whole world watches the American election to see what's going to happen. And so, does the left bear any responsibility? Maybe, like pushing very left wing ideas before their time, which oh, what's it called? It's like is it the Barbra Streisand effect? Where I think the Barbra Streisand effect is when you try to hide something, and as a result of trying to hide something, it actually gains greater popularity. So I don't know if it's exactly the Barbra Streisand effect, but there might be something similar happening where um, if an idea is pushed too early, then as a result, it'll be, even if it was like going to be accepted 5, 10 years down the line, it'll be pushed back on quite hard, and there'll be a groundswell in of dissidents against the idea. So I think that there's potential that that happened, but I mean, was that the deciding factor at the end of the day? I don't know if that would have been the deciding factor at the end of the day. I think there was worldwide inflation, and that would have played a big role. I do see what Destiny is saying about the conservative media environment versus the liberal left wing media environment. Yeah, I'm sure that there's a responsibility that could be held. And in fact, if you're on the political left, you kind of have to think about it that way in order not to be completely hopeless. Because if you don't think there's any responsibility, then you don't. Then I think it sort of follows that you don't think there's anything that can be changed. So, but we'll see what it says.
Like Donald Trump won
Mm-hmm.
for having a conversation about the left, which is many different individuals and many different factions. And forget the Hassan pipe. Yeah, we know Hassan and them will just say they're not for a socialist revolution, so we're not in favor of them. But I'm talking about like the Pod Save America type crew, your classic sort of liberal Kyle Kalinske type person. What did they do wrong? What did they have wrong?
So the thing that I'm talking about in terms of changing the media environment is I think that the left needs to do in-group, out-group better. The in-group right now is including too many people that are not supporting the candidate or the party. Those are the big things.
Yeah, like Hassan.
Yeah, or Breaking Points, or the Majority Report, kind of, or people like Brianna Joy Gray or Jimmy Dore, all these people who are like the left. Like all of these people need to not be considered part of the in-group of like the Democratic.
Why do you not think that Breaking Points and Jimmy Dore and the sort of the populist left have good points that could be adopted by the mainstream
Don't
left?
care if they have good points. The problem is that there's a lot of value in group out-group signaling that the right understands. The right is very good at enforcing in-group behaviors and forcing people to become part of the out-group if they don't adopt them. So, for instance, support of Donald Trump was ubiquitous among every single right-wing media outlet and every single centrist or independent media outlet. On the left, if you were a supporter of the candidate, people kind of made fun of you. Like, even when I would go on shows, I was like, yeah, hell yeah, I'm voting for Biden. I'm riding with Biden. Or, yeah, I'm voting for Kamala. Like, even to be excited about that, I'm going to get roasted by even left-leaning media or whatever.
I think that's circumstantial. That's because Biden was a walking corpse, right?
Donald Trump is a literal
uncharisma.
authoritarian, senile dipshit who has engaged in multiple crimes, is convicted of 34 felonies, couldn't tell the difference between his wife and another woman, was held civilly liable for rape. Like, it's not even close to comparable.
But as you said, nobody cares about that, but everyone saw that Biden was a walking corpse.
Yeah, but why does nobody care about those things about Trump? It's because anytime
human nature is very just sense-oriented. If I see an old man who can barely talk, it doesn't matter what the other person says. The juxtaposition is so much so that there's no way I can vote for that person.
Yeah, and I think it's
I think there's probably an element of what Paul was saying, but I think that I agree with a lot of what Destiny is saying as well, where there's this kind of ubiquitous support for Trump in right-wing media circles, but he didn't find that in the others in left-wing media circles. But I mean, I really don't know where to point the finger of blame for that, whether it comes down on the left-wing media sources to um, to be better at, as Destiny says, the in-group out-group, or if the reason why the right in this instance is so much better at in-group out-group is because their candidate was, I guess, seen by their side, by their base, as more charismatic, right? And so it sort of allows for this this media messaging, and the media messaging that is very that is ubiquitously pro-Trump, that sort of messaging to rise to the surface because more people already agree with that, and so they're going to be consuming that more, and the incentives therefore are set up um, for the right wing media to create that sort of environment and to take advantage of the in group, out group messaging that Destiny is talking about. But maybe it was just the fact that maybe it was just the case that the left wing candidates weren't charismatic enough. And, I mean, as Paul said, there's also the issue of Biden being seen as senile as well, and maybe Kamala Harris being seen as sort of awkward and uncharismatic, though. Um, so yeah, I don't know exactly where to point the finger of blame and like which way the causality goes there.
Because if Donald Trump is accused of something or somebody says something about him, Donald Trump gets to run the gamut on this whole right-wing media circuit that won't hold him to account for literally a single thing. And then on the left, it's like we have to hold our own accountable and all this and all this. Well, not maybe. I mean, that's true. Like, when was the last time Donald Trump was seriously challenged on any podcast that you saw? Was he challenged on? And even this should bother you as a centrist. Do you think Donald Trump was challenged on Lex Friedman or challenged on Joe Rogan?
No, Lex Friedman lacks as much of a spine as I'd like him to have.
Well, no, because when I was on Lex Friedman, we spent an hour talking about me.
Really? You thought that was a challenging interview that Lex gave you?
He spent an hour critiquing my use of the word retarded.
Well,
Donald Trump engaged in an insurrection. He didn't even ask me about it.
That's not a challenging interview. I mean, like a challenging interview with like Donald Trump. I agree that first off, Donald Trump is the most boring interviewee. He dodges every question. It's so predictable. The only interesting interview I saw with him was Theo Vaughn's, where he briefly talked about like his brother was an alcoholic. I didn't know that Donald Trump had an older brother to begin with that was an alcoholic, and it's like, oh, there's a person here. That's interesting. Everything else is just dodging and shit. And like
but the only reason why he's boring to be interviewed is because nobody actually interviews him. They just want him to walk him through the talking points every time.
Sure. Well, I do think there is something to be said about. I mean, I agree. There's like a bunch of things that.
I think I will move on. Arguing about transgender children, most wrong thing, RFK Jr. Yeah, okay, making America healthy again. Let's see.
Things. Okay, like I said earlier, I'm glad RFK is. What is he? What did they say he's going to be? The head of
Health and Human Services.
HHS.
See, I don't even know. I couldn't tell you what the fundamental distinction between that and like the FDA is. I
believe the FDA is under HHS, is my understanding.
The reason, if I were to steel man RFK, certainly you agree that there's a serious chronic illness epidemic in this country, yeah? Like obesity rates, we spend more. Okay, you seemed already you're...
I agree with it, but RFK wouldn't help or address it at all. Because he's a dipshit.
Perfectly reasonable. That's perfectly possible. I agree with that. But again, I'm thinking more about like why did Trump win, and like why did a bunch of like, for example, way more suburban moms voted for Trump than everyone thought they were. One of the hypotheses is like suburban moms care a lot about their kids' health, and that was such a Make America Healthy Again was kind of a focus thing. Chronic illness was never mentioned once by the Kamala Harris campaign, as far as someone said. Could be true, maybe not. But certainly was a focus of the Trump campaign. That's a very real issue. And I guess it's just like RFK, for better or worse, and probably worse, but no one else, there was not even a voice on the left that was calling out to the same degree. Fertilizers, all these different chemicals that are banned in Europe. I know it's a talking point on the left, which is why I think a lot of like otherwise left-leaning suburban moms and people voted for Trump. But it was not part of the campaign. So to me, that's an example of like, it's media ecosystem aside, you still need to have the right underlying message.
Yeah, but who even is that?
I mean, I think, thinking about what kind of role did RFK Jr. and, specifically his messaging and how that then relates to Trump. around chronic disease influence the election? Did it help? I would guess that it did. I mean, like, RFK Jr. had some portion of the Trump vote, and so aligning himself then under Trump instead would have helped a little bit. Um, I mean, would it have synergized to the extent that that it was a deciding factor? Probably not, but could it have been one of the deciding factors, like of two or three? I don't know about that either. But could have been a factor at all. Yes, obviously. Um, but yeah, I guess it depends exactly where he wants to go with this. Does he want to talk about the legitimacy of some of these claims? I mean, I would agree with what Destiny said before, where he's probably not going to be very good at addressing these things. He believes some absolutely wild stuff about human health. And it's so weird. Like he talks a lot about, like food dyes and colors and additives and pesticides and all of those sorts of things. And there needs to be like some kind of conversation about those things, sure. But the impact of that on like our health and on chronic disease is is quite tiny, and he speaks about it in such disproportion to what the real problems are. With just like excess calories, ultra processed like junk food, basically. Um, those are the bigger problems. Not eating a generally healthy diet, and yet he spends all of his time talking about these kind of niche side issues that maybe not, and may or may not have some effect. But at the end of the day, would be like maybe 5% of the difference, maybe. So yeah, I don't know. But in terms of is it effective messaging? Well, um, I mean, somewhat, but I don't think it's that big.
That wasn't even close to the one of the larger motivating things for the election was
To make
chronic
America
health
healthy
issues.
again?
Yeah, chronic health
Uh-huh.
issues. Also, again, how do you even signal on shit like this when none of it is even real? Like, I remember conservative. How old are you again? Do you say this?
You want to guess?
31.
I'll be 28 in 2 weeks.
Okay. When Michelle Obama talked about making kids healthier for school lunches,
Oh, yeah.
conservatives basically fucking collectively killed themselves. It was like it was an international traumatic PTSD inducing event for them. It was
I was in high school
unfathomable.
when
Yeah,
I remember
they
all
lost their fucking shit over it. So the idea now that these same people suddenly are like massively bought into and caring about like health foods that we eat, like bullshit. And even fucking RFK doesn't give a fuck because he saw him on an airplane eating fucking McDonald's 2 days ago. Okay, so like,
All right, that's I don't know if he's joking or not, but I mean, like a single occasion of somebody eating McDonald's, and I think like they did like a thing where he like fried because one of RFK Jr.'s things is that seed oils are a major driver of chronic disease, and so a lot of things that would be seen as kind of like junk food that are that way because they contain so many seed oils. And I mean, I may be wrong about this, so I mean, I guess no one's out there to fact check me, but if somebody was. I believe that specifically there they fried the chips in tallow, like beef tallow or something like that, which he believes is healthy. But anyway, that's all irrelevant anyway, because even if that wasn't true, I don't think he eats that way all the time, and I think it's fine for people to who even are very judicious about their health and about health messaging to from time to time, eat something that they just like the taste of. So yeah.
what this is supposed to be now. And again, even just think about what you're saying. Like the Republicans are the ones that have to dictate like all the talking point. Like Donald Trump himself said he didn't believe in exercise because he thought it wore down his fucking battery. You have a limited battery in your body. And these are the
Facts. Just Trump popping off.
people that you want me to take seriously about exercise. Like,
No.
fuck that. That's retarded.
No.
I don't think Americans
No,
cared
no,
about this talking point. I don't think they gave a fuck about this at all. Some might point to it, but I don't believe it. And I don't think Kamala messaging or signaling on this, I don't think it would have done anything at all for her. I think it would have been.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't think it would have done anything for her either. I think that it would have, like, I mean, unless she had like some new perspective and new way to come about it, it probably would have seen as like just being like a copycat or something like that. So it probably would have been perceived that way, unfortunately. But I mean, I'm totally for it being part of the conversation. I love that. But yeah, I'm not exactly sure what Paul's trying to get at here.
That's fair. Like, if I'm being honest, I think you are vastly underestimating the degree. You've heard Maha, right? Make America Healthy Again.
I
I
haven't.
certainly
But
saw
it
that
might have been a thing, but
everywhere.
maybe I missed it. But
Okay. See, now I'm even more suspicious that you are as much in a bubble as certainly other people. Because I'm actually Maha was a whole. Okay, well I won't harp on it.
I have heard of Maha, and it was a whole thing, particularly on like Twitter, but it was sort of like a terminally online thing, is my understanding. I don't know if this was, I mean, I may have been getting into the local, into sort of mainstream media. I think it probably was actually, but I don't like proportionally, it didn't take up that much room,
But like
is my
this is like
perception.
Joe Rogan has people on all the time. Certainly crazies like well, I don't know, is Russell Brand against vaccinating his kids? Probably. Like you can obviously go too far on stuff, but like Callie Means and Casey Means, for example, like one is a Stanford surgeon and the other worked for like Pfizer or something like that. It's like they were on Tucker Carlson with like 6 million views. They were on Bill Maher the other day. It's like that was a whole major part of it. And I guess are you open to the fact that you might be like pretty wrong on this to the degree that which influenced the election?
no, I don't think so. All I do is I look at exit polls and stuff. I mean,
Sure.
I didn't see
JJ
health or
McCullough of
anything.
you.
I thought it was like what?
That's very JJ McCullough of you. JJ
Okay.
just gets all he only looks at polls and stuff. He never. That's fair. I'm probably more schizo than you. You're probably more autist than I am. Where schizo is like
Paul has this strange thing where he puts, I can't remember. I think he might have got it from J-Reg, or maybe he did it himself. I'm not sure. He puts like, and I don't know how he operationalizes, like how he defines these terms, but he has like schizoid on one end of the spectrum, and then like autism, because he says autist on the other end, with one being kind of like more the creative and the other more the like analytical. So I mean, I don't know how this is not how I conceptualize a dimension of people's personalities, but that's just the context.
like I'm trying to see the like what's happening in 5-10 years like psychologically with very little like concrete evidence. It's all vibes based, and you're more you're probably more focused on I need.
I mean,
Concrete evidence before
I
I
try to
accept
account for
belief.
both. I know that the RFK Make America Healthy Again. I heard that a few times. I just don't know how like big of a
Okay, fair
part
enough.
of the campaign.
I
I
don't know.
think things like immigration and the economy and inflate like stuff like this were driving the American conversation more. But I could be wrong. Maybe I'm in different
Yeah,
parts. But
and I'm not even saying that it was bigger than the economy, but I do think it was a bigger part. But I have no evidence. It's all vibes based. That's fair.
okay.
I love Vivek Ramaswamy. I've listened to him a bunch. I've never heard him say anything that was incredibly stupid.
I mean, Paul loves the vibes based stuff. Like vibes based, I just really can't. I don't like Vivek at all. I see him as really slimy, um, and it feels like he's always speaking in a very measured way. He's always trying to say the best thing and keep his image totally pristine and clean. And it really reads to me as very inauthentic and ingenuine. And it's so interesting to me because I know a person or two who likes Vivek as well. And it's so interesting to me how we can like watch the same video, see the same thing, and I can come away with kind of like this, like this gross feeling, and then they are sort of pumped up and they really love what he had to say. So that's always really interesting to me. How that can happen, and just like what is it that what differences between people like accounts for that? Is it just because they might like what he's saying, and I don't think it's that, because I've like heard him say things that I might uh agree with, like just nominally, like the content of his words is fine, but I still come away with this gross feeling a lot of the time. So that's always very interesting to me. I wonder what Destiny will say. I mean, Destiny doesn't like Vivek, so
Okay.
Should I have a different opinion than I do?
I don't.
I think you said what this was a while back. Again, I don't have evidence.
Mhm.
But you said something like the litmus test for determining whether or not someone is a fucking moron is whether they like Vivek Ramaswamy. And I was like,
Was
well,
it
apparently I'm a
Vivek or
fucking
was
moron.
it RFK? It might have been Vivek too. Vivek to me just seemed
Yeah.
like he was just an empty populist. He comes up and he says things that sound good, but there's like no empirical backing. There's no like historical backing. It just says things that sounds good, and that's it.
Well, fuck. That's That's sort of how I evaluate what you do. Is like you sound good on a lot of things, and then I say, well, he's probably right on things. I mean, I guess.
Well, this is an interesting one. I think they do. I saw it in the timestamps. They get into it later. People's character are a heuristic for their credibility. That's that'll be an interesting
It's
one.
like
Well, what do you think? Like, give me what's a solid policy proposal from
so
Vivek
I
Ramaswamy?
yeah. So I listened to him on Andrew Schultz, one of the leading new
You might
media
skip ahead
figures
actually, because intense argument about abolishing the Department of Education. I'm kind of interested in that.
of
All right.
the modern era. He wants to get rid of the Department of Education.
Yeah, that's fucking. So he's an idiot. Okay.
Okay, so why is that a bad policy?
Well, because one, broadly speaking, I think U.S. college level education is pretty successful. I think it's a huge driver of like better income earnings after.
On second thought, I don't have actually too much of substance to contribute here, so I might skip ahead to where they bring up a clip and just see what's said there.
Indisputable fact about
taxpayer dollars that for the Department of Education. Relevant?
All right.
About government reform. It's interesting how eager people are to skip over that question and just to talk about, okay, but we got the status quo and it's just going to be disruptive, versus asking the question of, okay, this institution was created, it had an original purpose. Is that purpose still relevant? Is this organization at all fulfilling that purpose today? To me, those are some relevant questions to ask. So let's talk about that for the Department of Education. Its purpose was relevant at that time, which was to make sure that localities and particularly states were not siphoning dollars, taxpayer dollars, away from predominantly black school districts to predominantly white ones. And that was not a theoretical concern at the time. It was happening, or there was at least some evidence that was happening in certain states in the South. And so you may say you don't like the federal solution, you may say you like the federal solution, but like it or not, that was the original purpose of the U.S. Department of Education, to make sure that from a federal perspective, states were not systematically disadvantaging black school districts over predominantly white ones. However noble and relevant that purpose may have been 6 decades ago, it's not a relevant purpose today. There's no evidence today of states intentionally mapping out which are the black versus white school districts and siphoning money in one direction versus another. To the contrary, one of the things we've learned is that the school districts in the inner city, many of which are predominantly black, actually spend more money per student than other school districts for a worse result as measured.
Okay, sorry.
So I don't know anything about the empirical claims that he's making around the reason for the founding of the Department of Education. I mean, like what he's saying here could be correct. What are the wrinkles of, I guess, that I would point out here is it seems like I mean, maybe I should go watch it back, but it seems like he's kind of making the argument, hey, an institution can be created for a specific purpose in its day, and that specific purpose can even be noble, but regardless of that, several decades later, it may have outgrown its usefulness, and you could probably extend that argument to say things like it may even be actively counterproductive if it's basically just bureaucratic bloat. So, and I think like as a concept, I could agree with that. I mean, one thing to note is that the purpose for an organization can and likely does shift over time as it takes on more responsibilities and as its relationship with other entities evolve as well throughout time. And you kind of get this negotiation of, okay, what are these responsibilities for this organization versus others, etc. So I don't think that its purpose is necessarily like the analysis for whether it's fit for purpose we should just be looking at the reason why it was created. But what he's saying could form part of a cohesive argument. But I think right now we're just looking at surface level stuff, so I'd need more details.
I don't know if critiquing the history is necessary or not. It's probably not.
Probably is not.
It's probably not. It seems like the Department of Education was created in 1867. It's not even worth. It's not working out. But okay. But we'll keep listening. Okay. We'll look for the argument. Okay.
Evidence today of states intentionally mapping out which are the black versus white school districts and siphoning money in one direction versus another. To the contrary, one of the things we've learned is that the school districts in the inner city, many of which are predominantly black, actually spend more money per student than other school districts for a worse result as measured by test scores and other performance on a per student basis, suggesting that there are other factors than the dollar expenditures per school determining student success, and actually suggesting that even the overfunding of some of those already poorly run schools rewards them for their actual bureaucratic failures.
I'm not sure that all the Department of Education does is increase funding for schools where where they're not getting the results. So I would need I don't think that's what the Department of Education does. So like Department of Ed USA functions. Yeah, so policies on, yes, federal financial aid for education distribution, the collection of data, disseminating research, focusing on key issues. Yeah, so there's quite a wide suite of functions here. So, I mean, we'll see where it goes with it, but so far, I remain unconvinced.
Okay, that's just an unbelievable logical fallacy. I am familiar empirically with the idea that just throwing more money at things doesn't necessarily make those outcomes better when it comes to education. But there are other really basic, like statistical things that we can imagine are at play. So, for instance, if I spend $10,000 on chemotherapy versus $1 million on chemotherapy, there might be very little difference in patient outcome, but that doesn't mean that I could just spend $0 on chemotherapy. There might be like thresholds at the top or bottom that significantly alter outcomes. Number one. Number two, just because spending more money doesn't improve outcomes doesn't necessarily mean that when we spend more money, we're creating worse outcomes. Again, to go with the hospital example, my guess is the more money that you spend on a patient, probably the worse outcomes that patient has. But why? If I go to the hospital, they're probably spending what, $100 to take my wisdom tooth out, or $1,000 for a wisdom tooth extraction or whatever. But if I go in and I have like major surgery, that's probably way more expensive, but it's major surgery. I'm more likely to die. That's just one example of how what he's saying doesn't necessarily logically follow. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's wrong. He could go on to demonstrate why spending more money on a bureaucracy is like creating worse outcomes, but he needs to demonstrate that because what he said so far isn't a logical argument, right? You agree with me
I agree with that.
so far?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Go on.
So against that backdrop, the Department of Education has instead extrapolated that original purpose of what was a racial equality purpose to instead implement a different vision of racial equity through the ideologies that they demand in the content of the curriculum
I would like some evidence for that.
that these public schools actually teach. So Department of Education funding.
So the federal government cannot dictate curriculums to school. So he might just be referring to colleges here. I'm not sure, but there is no federal national
I think
curriculum.
he gives an example of what he's talking about.
All right, we'll hear it.
I have listened to this clip.
Sure. Okay.
So federal funding accounts for about, giving you round numbers here, but around 10% of the funding of most public schools across the country. But that comes with strings attached. So in today's Department of Education, this didn't happen back in 1970, but it's happening today. Ironically, it's funny how these things change with the bureaucracies that fail. They blow smoke to cover up for their own failures.
Well, things could also just change because new problems arise in front of us and you have to confront and deal with like the idea that the bureaucracies expand or the bureaucracies are dealing with different issues today than they did in the past. This obviously, yes, we have different issues today in the past, but whatever. All right.
And this is one of the issues, I think, or one of the complications, the externalities of this kind of format where you're just interviewing somebody with without yourself knowing too much about the issue and being able to offer only minimal pushback, as I think Lex often finds himself in the position of, though I haven't decided whether I truly don't know if this is like still like a good thing for the world en masse or whatever, but because I do think that there's a lot to be said for maybe formal debate contexts or at least discussions between people who are knowledgeable on a topic and disagree. But the externality is that when they're laying out their case, they can maybe the realm of facts, the area of facts that you can know is this big, and if you're just allowing somebody to speak freely without pushing back on anything, they can pick whichever facts they want. I mean, everyone's familiar with the term cherry picking, and then they can create a story which sounds really legitimate and sounds like, oh yeah, that would make sense. That's evidence based. They can really lay out a rhetorically nice sounding argument. But when you start to pull at the threads and pull at the edges of this, it completely falls apart. So that's one of the disadvantages is that, and the other thing is that from the perspective of a viewer who might be predisposed to agree, they may, without even realizing it, as they start to agree with any conclusions that the person is coming to, implicitly sign on to all of the other facts that have been stated, even though there hasn't been, even though there may not be good evidence to support them. So that's the sort of thing that like an intimate kind of debate or critical discussion setting can, you can get that, that can be avoided in that setting. But like there are advantages to just allowing somebody to speak and lay out a case as well, right? But I mean, I would never say that, for instance, university lectures all have to be a debate context. So it probably it's probably a little case specific, but you see here that Destiny is naturally wanting to push back on some of the framing that Vivek is putting forward here.
What happens with today's Department of Education? They effectively say you don't get that funding unless you adopt certain goals deemed at achieving racial or gender equity goals. And in fact, they also intervene in the curriculum where there's evidence of schools in the Midwest or in the Great Plains that have been denied funding because Department of Education funding, so long as they have certain subjects like archery. There was one instance of a school that had archery in its curriculum. I find that to be pretty interesting, actually. I think that...
Is he talking about like Title IX stuff? I wish he... Okay, do I want to look at the specific example?
We don't...
Sorry, go ahead.
I mean...
Well, because like...
We don't have
hold
to.
on. Well, there
wanna...
are... Because this is another issue that I have. I hate this guy so much. Thank you for reminding me why I hate this fucking guy so much. Things that he's saying are so broad that there are worlds where what he's saying could be so horrible. Like, wow, this is a big problem. Or things where what he's saying are like, well, this is actually good. I like this. So for instance, what he's saying right now, that like the federal government forces you to have certain equality things or whatever, you know, and otherwise they'll pull your funding. Well, that could be a world where they're like, oh, you have to teach critical race theory to first graders and tell them that they can be trans if they want to, right? And I'd be like, okay, well, this is really bad. But what if it's like, but what if it's like Title IX stuff where it's like, oh, if you have, if you've got sports teams for men, you need to have equivalent sports teams for women, or like you can't discriminate against, you can't have like race-based like adoption for students. You can't like say we want 10% black. Well, okay, I don't know if that's that bad. That's probably fine. We probably expect that from publicly funded things, right? So I would need more examples there. But it sounds like he's giving one about archery. Hold on.
Archery. There was one instance of a school that had archery in its curriculum. I find that to be pretty interesting, actually. I think you have different kinds of physical education. This is one that combines mental focus with physical aptitude. But hey, maybe I'm biased. Doesn't matter whether you like archery or not. I don't think it's the federal government's job to withhold funding from a school because they include something in their curriculum that the federal government deems inappropriate.
Okay, I have to look this one up. So federal government withhold funding archery school. Biden admin. Okay, Fox. We got a good Fox News articles. Okay. Biden admin withholding key funding for schools with hunting and archery programs. As a leveling a direct attack on hunters' ability to pass down hunting to the newest generation. Sorry. Biden administration is blocking key federal funding earmarked under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965 for schools with hunting and archery programs. Okay. According to federal guidance circulated among hunting education.
I am kind of interested in this, and I think that this can be a good way to figure out if you want to outsource your thinking to a person, or at least it's maybe one of the things that can be done, where you might occasionally look into things that, like certain examples that somebody brings up, or things that can be fact checked, and you see, okay, does it actually hold up to scrutiny? It's not going to be fully foolproof, because maybe sometimes they're very domain specific, or just because one person's wrong on one thing doesn't mean they're wrong on other things. But if you start to put together a pattern that a person is, a person's story doesn't seem to actually be holding up to even a cursory scrutiny, you might think twice before outsourcing your thinking to that person.
Groups and shared with Fox News Digital, the Department of Education determined that under the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, BSC-A passed last year, school hunting and archery classes are precluded from receiving federal funding. The interpretation could impact millions of American children enrolled in such programs. Okay, so two huge problems right here. So one is, it sounds like this is going to be statutory interpretation from the federal government from a law passed by Congress. So this is a law passed by Congress, Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. So one, there's a law from Congress, so I wouldn't necessarily blame Biden. But then two, are they saying that they would pull funding from the entire school? Or are they just saying that the classes, just those classes themselves might not receive federal funding? Because that's a significantly different thing, right? Would you agree with that?
Maybe, sure.
Right, like let's say the federal government said we're also not going to fund like pottery gendered classes or some bullshit, right? There's probably I don't know if right.
I would not want my federal tax dollars going to pottery.
Yeah, maybe that we probably don't want to fund every single thing that a school might have. However, okay, so it's a negative for children. As a former educator of 30 plus years, I was always trying to find a way to engage students. Get every Fish and Wildlife trying to do this. According to organization, some of these schools have canceled. Okay, some of these schools have already canceled plans to include archery or hunting education courses in the curriculum due to the Education Department guidance. In June 2022, the SCA was passed with large majorities in the House and Senate. meaning Democrats and Republicans, the push past the bill, which broadly seeks to promote safer, more inclusive, and positive school environments. When the education came after mass shootings, the legislation includes an amendment listing prohibited uses of federal school funding. That amendment prohibits the ESEA funds from helping provide any person. Okay. So part of this legislation, that amendment prohibits the ESEA funds from helping provide any person with a dangerous weapon or to provide training in the use of a dangerous weapon. So it sounds like this was a law that was passed by Congress that
Interesting. So the Department of Education is just doing what it thinks is legally congruent with a law passed by Congress. Is that right?
includes this provision. The federal government's job is to interpret that law and then enforce it appropriately. So I see that. However, it looks like Congress also passed another law later on that amended this, Protecting Hunting Heritage and Education Act, HR 5110. And it seems like this is a thing that they introduced and they passed literally just to amend this particular thing, right? So summary, this use authorizes the use of federal elementary and secondary education funds to purchase or use dangerous weapons for purposes of providing students with educational instruction or educational enrichment activities such as archery, hunting, other shooting sports, even shooting sports or culinary arts. Okay, cool. Okay, so
Elite.
Okay, so let's back up.
I did archery in gym for what it's worth in high school.
Okay, so let's
And
back up
culinary
now with this and let's listen to what Vivek says again. Hold on.
Planes that have been denied funding because Department of Education funding, so long as they have killed their own failures. What happens with today's Department of Education? They effectively say you don't get that funding unless you adopt certain goals deemed at achieving racial or gender equity goals. And in fact, they also intervene in the curriculum where there's evidence of schools in the Midwest or in the Great Plains that have been denied funding because Department of Education funding, so long as they have certain subjects like archery. There was one instance of a school that had archery in its curriculum. I find that to be pretty interesting, actually. I think that.
So his presentation on here.
Yeah. So this is interesting. I want to know the timing of the of that, and also I want to know. I mean, and Destiny pointed this out earlier, whether or not funding is being denied broad spectrum, or if it's just being denied in this specific instance. And then I want to know the timing too regarding if it was before Congress passed. I think it was an amendment to the an amendment to whatever it was that the government was or Department of Education or whatever was arguing prohibited funds being allocated for the provision and training in dangerous weapons like archery. So yeah, definitely a simplified version being put forward here by Vivek. Depending on the actual facts of the case, though, I would be fine with the simplified version, but I just don't know those facts.
The way that I'm hearing him present this, and unfortunately, I guess it's one of the reasons I have to read so much today. Just hearing his summary here, I would never trust this guy to tell me a single true fact in the history of all of anything he would ever talk about. I wouldn't trust
Maybe a little harsh based on my reading.
anything he says. The fact that he's not mentioning that this was a recent law passed by Congress that dictated in the law that funds can't go to things that enable students to train with weapons. The fact that this wasn't just a random rule that came from the from the executive, but it came after a new law was passed by Congress, and that Congress even passed another law to change it. He makes it sound like, right, the takeaway here is that, like, wow, the Department of Education is just telling kids they can't even learn archery for no reason. That's evil and horrible.
He does make it sound like that here, actually, in fairness. Yeah, I mean, maybe there's a steel man for Vivek here if there are certain details on his side, but yeah, I think, and I do think it's a little harsh to say that he would never trust anything he's ever said in the history of forever, still based on this, but but yeah, I would say it's not it's a little worrying.
This is like just totally whatever. But sorry, we'll keep going. 2.5 minutes.
That I think you have different kinds of physical education. This is one that combines mental focus with physical aptitude. But hey, maybe I'm biased. Doesn't matter whether you like archery or not. I don't think it's the federal government's job to withhold funding from a school because they include something in their curriculum that the federal government deems inappropriate.
So the federal government didn't deem it inappropriate. The Congress did. I don't know if he doesn't know how the three branches of government work. I don't know if he's completely and totally ignorant on everything.
Once again, depending on the timing, because maybe I mean, I don't know. It wasn't mentioned as far as I heard. I didn't hear Destiny mention it. But maybe after the amendment was passed is when the school funding was denied or something like that. But yeah.
Function of the government. A lot of conservatives seem to not understand how any of the branches of government work. The federal government, the executive branch, cannot make
But then you would also need to take like the extra leap because they did say actually when Destiny read the decision of was it the Department of Education? They did say that it was because of this bill that Congress passed. So you would need to then take the extra step if you were Vivek to say that hey, this is done not for the reason that they said it was, but for other reasons. And then you'd presumably need to have some level of evidence for that.
Decisions on its own,
found that to be irrelevant.
about laws. They can only make decisions about rules which come from laws. And this rule did come from a law that was passed by the legislature, by Congress. But maybe he doesn't know that because he's a fucking moron. It's possible.
Locality found that to be a relevant locus of education. So what you see then is an abandonment of the original purpose that's long past. You don't have this problem that the Department of Education was originally formed to solve of siphoning money from black school districts to white school districts and laundering that effectively in public funds. That doesn't exist anymore.
I don't really care about the abandonment of the original purpose. I mean, like even granting that it is the original purpose, I don't really care as long as it's taken on a positive purpose. So yeah, it doesn't really matter to me.
So they find new purposes instead, creating a lot more damage along the way. So you asked me to steel man it, and can I say something constructive rather than just pounding down on the other side?
And so yeah, his argument is that they found more purposes along the way and that they've created something more destructive. But I don't think he's illustrated that at all.
One way to think about this is for a lot of these agencies, were many of them formed with a positive intention at the outset? Yes. Where that positive intention existed, I'm still a skeptic of creating bureaucracies, but if you're going to create one, at least make it, what should we call it? A task force. Make it a task force. A task force versus an agency means after it's done, you celebrate, you've done your work, pat yourself on the back, and then move on, rather than creating a standing bureaucracy, which actually finds things to do after it has already solved or addressed the first reason it was born in the first place. And I think we don't have enough of that in our culture. I mean, even if you have a company that's generated tons of cash
I don't know enough about politics in order to comment on any of this.
flow, and it solved a problem. Let's say it's a biopharmaceutical company that developed a cure to some disease, and the only thing people knew at that company was how to develop a cure to that disease, and they generated a boatload of cash from doing it. At a certain point, you could just give it to your shareholders and close up shop, and that's actually a beautiful thing to do. You don't see that happen enough in the American consciousness and the American culture of
When you create what? I'm sorry, and I could just learn it. What large pharmaceutical company was founded with the purpose of inventing a single drug and then closing shop? Okay, but
an institution has achieved its purpose.
Almost done.
Celebrate it and then move on. And I think that culture in our government would result in a vastly restrained scope of government rather than today. It's a one-way ratchet. Once you cause it to come into existence, you cause new things to come into existence, but the old one that came into existence continues to persist and exist as well. And that's where you get.
All right, I think moving forward now to people's characters are a heuristic for their credibility.
Understand, and I know I've seen the people that you deal with. Now, to be fair, you bring a lot on yourself. I think you open your doors to debate anyone and everyone. So, but fair enough. Okay, but this is the broader point I was going to get to.
Okay.
Given this,
yeah,
and this is why. So, when I say vibes based, what I mean is, I mean a bunch of different things, but one of them is heuristics. I don't fucking know what Tylenol does to my body, like at a chemical level or what, at a molecular level. I just know that my doctor and other people and the FDA said it was cool. I've never once read a study that says the climate is warming. I just trust it. I could not defend at all in any debate whatsoever the theory of evolution.
Sure.
Don't know why it's believed. Missing link, I think.
Yeah, so yeah, I think, as people, we need to outsource our thinking, unfortunately. I mean, it'd be nice if we could all have deep wells of subject-specific knowledge on every single thing that we need to make a decision on. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's a certain amount of trust that's inherent in everything we do. In driving, you got to trust that when you're driving and you're going one way and then there are cars in the other lane going the other way, that they're not just going to turn and hit you, or that the car's not going to malfunction and blow up, or whatever else. There's a certain amount of trust that we just need to have in things. And one of the complicated things, I think this is difficult to communicate, I think this is what Paul's trying to communicate here, is when do we stop? When do we decide to take away the inherent trust that we have in things? So the inherent trust that we have in flying, the inherent trust that we have in governments of the world telling us that the Earth is round. Obviously, with both of those things, most people do not choose to take away their trust, nor should they, I don't think. But where's the line? And some people. And I don't know where that is. And so what Paul, I think, is trying to communicate is surely there's I mean, I guess he hasn't done this yet, but just reading the people's characters are a heuristic for their credibility. Surely there's a better way than um, trying to develop the deep subject matter expertise yourself on every single topic out there, because that's impossible. The world is so big now, and there are so many different domains and subjects, and each of those subjects and domains they have subcategories within them, and then each of those is a career that you do for your entire life, and you're learning things up until the day you die. So you can't just become an expert on everything. So you have to outsource your thinking. How do we navigate that? What characteristics of a person do we look for to tell us that they're trustworthy, or for an organization to tell us that they're trustworthy? What do we look for? So, um, I'll let Paul go forward.
Think we can predict shit. It would be all vague nonsense bullshit. But I'm utterly confident that the theory of evolution is true.
Okay.
So, just broadly, I think it's justified, perhaps not to you or your audience, but it's certainly justified for people to come here, or to just generally people to have opinions that they cannot even begin to defend, because they have the heuristic of, well, like with evolution, it's like, okay, if fucking every scientist, Richard Dawkins, Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, all these different people who hate each other to some degree and disagree with each other, Brett Weinstein, well, like if all of them agree it's true, that's a good heuristic for saying it's probably true, right?
I'm trying really hard not to attack you.
Oh, I mean, I actually think that what Paul's saying here, and I mean, maybe Destiny thinks that he's like missing a bigger picture, but I don't mind the idea of looking to people who have broad disagreements on things, and asking yourself the question, okay, well, what do they all believe in common? But the question would be, how broad of a group do you need to get? Do you need to get the person who's like a literal neo-Nazi, and then a person who's a little left of them, and then all the way to the center, and then all the way to the far left? Do you need to get all of those and then see what they have in common, or is it okay to get somebody, things that have a little bit more of a right split or a left split bias? So that'd be the question. But I think you know, um, consensus, perhaps especially consensus amongst people who typically disagree, though, how the variability and like the number of people that you need to get there is a question mark. But generally, consensus is probably one of the heuristics that we have for credibility. So I agree with that point. We'll see what Destiny says.
Okay. Broadly.
No, attack me.
Okay.
Please.
Broadly,
Just
I think I would
nicely.
agree with you. We don't have time to learn everything about every single thing, okay? But what is Trump's administration, if not embodied by people who stand in opposition to every single field of science when they inhabit these positions, right? Vivek's position here of abolishing the Department of Education, every single educated country in the world has a federal state entity for education. Or when we talk about the HHS head now, RFK Jr., right?
Bobby.
Like, yeah, nobody has the feelings on vaccines that he stands in opposition to so many different people, to so many government bodies, to so many other countries. Like, what do we, like, why would we trust what they say? Like, what is your heuristic that leads you to trust some of these people when they stand in opposition to all of the other people?
That's a fair question. Because based on what Paul was laying out and the broad interpretation on trust and consensus, and it's, you do question, why would Paul trust these people?
That's a good question. So like a Vivek, which I believe that is how you say it. His name. It's Vivek like cake. It's how I've seen it. I'm trying not to be racist.
Okay.
With Vivek, like I said, it's hard, but that's the thing. It's kind of hard to it's kind of hard to explain. Like it is an intuitive. Like it's kind of like if like I don't know how you like charisma. Like what makes one person more charismatic than someone else? It's like I can kind of put words to it. Like they sound more confident. Yeah, but like what? Like tell me at what point the inflection changes such that and you.
Yeah, I agree. I think that that's what it makes it hard, like judging, because I think that I could say, yeah, I mean, like looking at people's characters and looking at how they say things and, just things about them and the way they speak, the vibes, as it were, that can be a heuristic for credibility. And then, somebody who has completely different political beliefs to me might say, yeah, you know what, that can be a heuristic for credibility. But then when actual rubber hits the road, I think that their candidate is crap and they think my candidate is crap. So, yeah, I think it is a challenge here. I do wonder, like, because I've definitely had the experience of, just being alone and talking with my friends and sort of feeling very fluent and um, very articulate. And um, but then when it comes to, say, being in a situation where I'm sitting with my boss or somebody who's very high up in the organization, suddenly I'm not as articulate or fluent. Suddenly I'm second guessing myself. And I wonder to what extent Paul's getting that here with Destiny. I wonder, like, if he was with JJ or if he was with Rowan or something like that, I wonder if he would be. Um, Defending himself with more vigor. And I wonder if that'd be a good thing or a bad thing. And I wonder that for myself as well. Like, is the fact that I'm tripping over myself here in front of this high up person an indicator that maybe my standards aren't high enough in my normal everyday speech, and that's why I'm more articulate and more fluent because I'm not second guessing myself, and maybe it's a good thing I'm second guessing myself here. Or maybe is it, hey, it's probably more appropriate to, in a professional setting with somebody high up to push the brakes a little bit on how free flowing you're going to be with your conversation, but maybe I am hamstrung to quite a significant extent because of maybe my insecurity or something like that. So I just mentioned that because I wonder to what extent this might be true for Paul here as well. Like how I wonder how articulate he feels with Destiny, sitting there with Destiny versus with yeah, JJ or Rowan or something, or just with his friends.
You can identify.
And I'll just note, I wonder that for this as well, because I feel like when I start streaming, I maybe am a little bit more reserved than I am at this point here. But also, no one's in my stream, so actually talking to anybody. If at the point where I start getting people in my stream, is that going to change who I am, how I speak, and will I feel that? I don't know. So I'm interested to I'm interested in that.
Identify them. Like if someone ends on like a high note constantly, like
Sure.
that, and you can get to, but like there's a certain point where it's just beneath the ability to articulate it. And so, I like it's not a satisfying answer, but like
No,
I've
that's fine.
listened to several hours of conversation with Vivek, and
Yeah.
and which like Candace is the opposite. Candace Owens, who's on the right, just like Vivek, but I would say is significantly different. Like Candace Owens fucking lies through her teeth, says shit that I think she knows is bullshit. She's there to sell fucking ads,
Sure.
Like
Well, let's say real
I
quick.
can tell that, but I can't it's hard to articulate exactly where they. Like,
Yeah, so
you think
I
Candace is a
understand.
worse liar than Vivek, right? In your world,
They're both bad to me. I
Or
don't
from
know
your
how I could even
perception.
rank them, but
okay.
let's say
that's
that
fair. I would say Candace is definitely worse than Vivek.
I would say I like Candace less than I like Vivek. But I don't not a fan of either.
you mean when you say worse, what are we qualifying?
Just overall, in terms of like willing to bend the truth.
Yeah, I would say the content of what they say. Oh, you can't see the mic. That's so interesting. There we go. Interesting. Yeah, I would say the content of what they say to me is worse. Not that I've gone through and I've watched hours of either of them. And yeah, I would say the vibes are off more with Candace as well, to use some of Paul's language, than with Vivek, where it feels like maybe Candace is being deliberately narrow-minded and or obtuse and very conspiratorial in her thinking as well, which just throws me the wrong way.
Truth for instrumental gain.
Oh, Candace is almost second to none. She's fucking insane.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
But then I would argue that I can make the argument that people like.
that's your position. I just to be clear, we
Sure.
talked about this last time. I do think Candace is right about a lot of things.
That's fine, but
It's so annoying when Paul says that. I mean, like maybe, right? Like I guess I don't watch like a lot of her content, but I mean, like it's not impressive being right about um toothpaste being good for your teeth and it being good to brush your teeth versus never brushing them. Like maybe they're like basic facts that people take, or maybe there are basic facts that are very not difficult to come about, not impressive for somebody to believe in. So then to say like, hey, this person who believes these absolutely outrageous things, is skeptical of the moon landing. I don't think I'm misrepresenting her with that. Do your own research, but I don't believe I'm misrepresenting it. Um, and to say, hey, but they do say some true things. I mean, like, I would want the bar for those true things to be high in order for them to in order for that to be worth mentioning.
But I'm just saying that even given that standard, though, I could argue that Vivek is worse because he comes off as more trustworthy, so people are more likely to believe his lies, whereas Candace is.
Yeah, and so you might make a consequentialist argument that like Vivek is worse, but I think that like you can make a consequentialist argument that like somebody who's like, I don't know, I mean like level 1 evil is worse if they have access to 10,000 people versus um level 10 evil who has access to one person. Maybe you'd make the argument that the level 1 person, you can make the argument level 1 person is worse, but you sort of see where I'm going with somebody's reach might impact who you think is worse overall. But like to me, I think a lot of the times like how much I dislike somebody has to do more with what I perceive about their character, and like who they are as a person. Everything else being equal. It's probably not exactly true that it's always that. In reality, maybe some of their influence slips in. But when I'm talking about it, probably has more to do with the character side of things.
Is an easy litmus test for obviously it's crazy. Candace said it. Backing up, you just said that you can listen to Vivek talk. Okay, earlier you told me you gave me a way for developing an intuitive heuristic. Heuristics are intuitive. A heuristic for whether or not you would believe a particular thing, and you talked about evolution. What if it was the case that tomorrow Vivek did a little 1-minute spiel on why he didn't believe in evolution? Are you now?
I like this proposition, this hypothetical. I wonder what Paul's going to say. Yeah, so Destiny's going to ask, would you still trust him, basically? I think that's what he's going to ask. And I mean, that's pretty big for me. If somebody comes out and they say, and I make a habit of outsourcing my thinking to them, and they say they don't believe in it, in evolution. And I mean, maybe there's a scenario where I sort of like brush to the side if it's like for, like let's say they're like a hardcore Christian and they say, "Hey, look, there's evidence for evolution. I understand why people believe it, but I have a very strong prior that God exists and that the Bible is interpreted in this way." And so, while I think that if you didn't have that, then you would definitely, there's a world in which somebody makes an argument like that. While I'm like, "Yeah, okay, I disagree with you, but I don't think that this." Um, Necessarily, and especially if they're upfront with it and honest about it. I wouldn't say that it necessarily threatens my trust, at least that much, in outsourcing my thinking to them. But if they say things like "there's no evidence for evolution" and people have been lying to you, etc., then I think that would very much, and I think that should threaten people's trust in outsourcing their thoughts to them.
Because he's charismatic enough, is that going to move you off that position? Did the consensus of the scientific community and everything not actually matter at all before, and it's just
no, he's asking a different question. He's asking if Paul would be move his position on evolution because Vivek puts forward a contrary view. Everything I said is still true, though, by the way. So I mean, it was still very entertaining and very right. So
just the charismatic thing, or how do you do it when these two things clash?
Well, we have an actual example of this with Tucker Carlson, when Tucker Carlson was on Joe Rogan and said, macroevolution,
crazy.
that's never been proven. And Joe's like, are you serious? What do you mean macroevolution's never been proven? And that in my mind was like, oh, okay, that right there cements further for me, because I had a different view on Tucker, although I think Tucker fulfills an important role. But like Tucker Carlson denies outright evolution.
Yeah, but why do you think that?
In a recent podcast he's done with Brett, he says he misspoke there. I rewatched the clip, and like, I mean, if you're being really charitable, you can say that he spoke. Like, you can say like, oh, maybe he just got like carried away and didn't realize the weight that his words were holding. But I think that there's probably something more nefarious going on. Maybe he was just like either he just legitimately thought what he said, or he was being manipulative. But those are the explanations that read as most likely to me. So, yeah, that's what it is. But there is room for other interpretations.
Wait, but why was Joe Rogan your litmus test for that? Because didn't Joe Rogan in a conversation with
Joe Rogan at the time?
Sure, but didn't Joe Rogan in a conversation with Matt Walsh deny the moon landing?
Said he was skeptical of the moon landing. That was pretty funny. But yeah.
Did he? Does Joe?
He does. He doesn't
actually.
believe in the moon
Does
landing.
Joe not believe in the moon landing?
Yeah.
Well,
Well, maybe he has a stronger position than I thought. I thought his position was just that he's skeptical on it. Which is still which is still completely wild. But I didn't realize that he was like card carrying moon landing denier.
I guess I'm confident in the moon landing, but I'm more confident in the theory of evolution. I mean, it's not.
But
really,
why are you more confident in the how many? Because
there's more people of differing ideological views of high credibility.
But almost every person of high credibility would disagree with almost every prescription Vivek gives on government.
Okay, surely you understand that statement is suspect.
Okay, give me
almost every person of high credit. We're talking about 300 million people. Glenn Lowry, do you think?
I'm not talking about YouTube.
Yeah, I think I would probably agree with Paul here. I mean, it depends on how you once again define a word here. How you define credibility. So everybody who Destiny sees as credible. But then I think that the type of credibility that Paul is saying here is, hey, you take people from different places on the political aisle or on like the opinion spectrum, people from all these different places, and then you have a look at their place and all of the people that occupy that place, and you have a look at this person's credibility within that substrata, and then you see. And so you have the high credibility people there, and then you see how all the high credibility people's opinions compare. But yeah, between themselves. So I think that that's what Paul's talking about.
I'm saying just in the people that work and do education and administer around the world, and people that study education, people like I haven't seen any body of people or group of serious people that have said, "Oh yeah, abolishing these higher level educational entities would be way better for educational attainment in the United States." I haven't seen anybody credible that said that ever.
I mean,
it's just politicians.
What do you? I believe Thomas Sowell wrote a book about basically switching to private education. Is Thomas Sowell a complete fucking moron? Does he have
Thomas Sowell is literally cited all the time because he is such an outsider to the rest of the academic world. That's why people obsess over Sowell so much, of course.
Or he's just famous and he's the easiest one to go to.
No, he's literally cited over and over again because he's like a hardcore libertarian-esque person who stands against DEI and wokeness, and he's cited over and over.
Sure, but like, I'm not saying this to convince you. I'm just saying this to tell you what I honestly believe. It is absolutely the case that there are, in my mind, intelligent people of presumably good character, although you can only tell so much, obviously, but like they don't seem like obvious narcissists or something like that, or liars or psychopaths. Intelligent people of seemingly good character with some level of credibility who would agree that, hey, you could probably get rid of the Department of Education and scale down the government bureaucracy significantly. That seems... To be honest, I would even go so far as to say most people would agree that the government bureaucracy...
Maybe Paul's definition of credibility isn't exactly what I was thinking. But I was thinking that was the steel man. Yeah, then it would just come down to the empirical claim. I don't know if what Paul's saying here is correct.
Bureaucracy is overbloated to the point where it could use serious reduction.
It's a political talking point, though. Who does it? Nobody does that, because when they finally get in and look at government, like, oh fuck, okay, this is actually pretty hard. That's why there's never been like serious like cutting of it.
Maybe, or that's one possibility. Another possibility is that they're entrenched in settings. It's difficult to fire all these different.
Really? Why? The president has the authorization to do it.
Well, now he does, right? Wasn't that the whole shit? Wasn't that the? Or what's the?
Or I mean, Congress has the authorization to cut down on these things as well. Like,
Congress is gridlocked with all kinds of.
Okay, so I'm curious. Do you think that under Donald Trump, do you think that the federal spending is going to significantly decrease or decrease at all?
No, probably not. Trump's a terrible president. Trump will be probably a worse president.
Okay, but this guy Vivek that you trust is literally on the committee of Doge with fucking Elon.
Oh,
so
not anymore.
Yeah, I will say, in spite of what Vivek and Elon do, Doge, Department of Government Efficiency.
So then,
what do you like? Peter Thiel?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Do you hate him?
I've heard a lot of not great things about him, but
Have you verified those things that are not great about him?
no. But every single person I've seen in the crypto community that talks about politics or anything related to government is absolutely fucking delusional and insane, and they all support Trump.
So how confident are you that Peter Thiel is not a high credible individual?
Probably like 25-30%.
Okay.
But the fact that everything that comes from that community, oh yeah, sure. I haven't dug into him at all.
Okay, well, Peter Thiel is an example. There's many. I think it's Ben Horowitz. They did Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz. They're like two tech guys, who've built all these different companies and stuff. It's like there was a significant Silicon Valley backing of, Donald Trump. Like those people have demonstrable proof that they're at least intelligent, given that they've produced large companies that are successful.
Yeah, but is your assumption that they're supporting Donald Trump out of some goodwill for how government should function, or that they're just interested in their own capital investments in their businesses?
Well, I think those two things can overlap. I think it can be in the.
I'm not asking if anything could overlap, right? I'm asking you, what would you think more likely is driving them?
If I skip ahead, Destiny believes he is deeply captured. Although maybe because I need to go to the bathroom, so I might be back in 2 minutes. I'm back. All right. Let's continue.
What were the options you gave me?
The good, like the care and good of the country, or just self-interest in their own companies?
I believe those two. I don't think those are separable. I think what's in your self.
I am going to skip ahead over to here, where viewership starts to rise a little bit to the new topic.
There's a war in Europe right now.
There were two world wars in Europe. There was the dissolution of Yugoslavia that was accompanied with genocides. I mean, like,
yeah, it's a degree. That's what I'm saying. It's a degree.
Sure.
More.
There are many people that critique Peter. There's people who are on the right who critique Peter Thiel to a significant degree. I believe for this exact line of thing. I just Ben Horowitz, or
isn't he like a
kind of a? I guess it's not like you were going to say. And
here we go.
So correct me if I'm wrong. You believe that I'm not like. Trust me, I will not be offended if the answer is yes. But you believe that I am there. I have some I'm captured in some to some degree, not like incentive wise with money or something like that. Although I'm more than willing to keep my opportunities open. But something psychologically is driving me to distort my perceptions unconsciously.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like to a certain extent, that's all of us. But is there something quite significant in Paul's case? Um, I don't know if I could say it's bigger than. I don't exactly know how to think. Save obvious cases. I don't know how to think about that um as like as a phenomena that has like a spectrum. So I don't know, but I mean, certainly from my point of view, I think that there's something psychologically that drives him away from what I think is right. And, to the extent that I am right, um maybe that's because I don't have that, or maybe I just am lucky and um I have the right ones. So yeah, I don't exactly know how to think about that as a phenomena that has a spectrum. Save the obvious example, save like obvious cases like, being captured by money, for instance. So, um, hmm, we'll see where this goes, though. Yeah.
1,000,000,000,000%. Yeah.
Okay. And what do you think that is specifically?
I don't know you well enough to say. Because I've already accused
Okay,
you of
interesting.
believing
What
some
would you?
things where you've said that, like,
Fair
well, actually, I
enough.
don't say that at all. So I could be right.
What
So I
would
don't
you?
know. Mhm.
What would you need? What would you need to ask me to find that out?
I love that question. It's a great question.
What would I need to ask you to figure
Or how
out?
would you go about finding that out? I don't know. Like what information
It's a very like honest conversation, I feel. Like they're just, they disagree, but they're being honest and they're putting forward what they believe. I think that's cool.
would you need to know about me or what I believe or what I've said or
Okay.
who I'm paid by?
Okay. Let's run down a few policy things. I'm going to make some predictions of how I think you would feel, and then you tell me if I'm right or
Okay.
wrong, okay?
Yes.
Okay. You're familiar broadly with Andrew Tate, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I'm
Yep. Okay.
familiar. Yes.
Broadly speaking, my guess is you would say that Andrew Tate is probably on the net a negative influence for men, and he's probably done some bad things. You're not 100% sure if all the charges in Romania are fair, and it seems like they might drum these up a little bit, but all in all, he's probably not a great guy. Is this about your opinion of Andrew Tate?
It's probably about my opinion of um, Andrew Tate. I mean, maybe I'd probably be a little more certain that he's done the things that he's being charged for, and um, I'd probably be very convinced that he's a net negative. But like, in general, I would agree with that, perhaps.
Except for the fact that he probably did do all the charges because of what he said about
Including the
his
rapes
video.
and everything that he was accused of, or
I don't know. I know the trafficking charge. I don't know what the full extent of charge.
okay,
But sure, let's go.
sorry.
Yes. Broadly, I agree. He's a net negative.
Okay. On the COVID lab leak stuff, is this a thing that you would say this was one of the largest examples of the mainstream media suppressing conversation about a topic that should have deserved to have been spoken about more because people that believed in lab leak were totally and wholly vindicated by evidence that came out later?
See, I don't even know the extent to which it was suppressed. I guess I didn't have my finger on the pulse at the time. And it felt like that there was talk about that at first. Maybe I'm in a different media environment though a little bit because I'm in Australia as opposed to the US. Though we do get a lot of US type news. Well, I do at least because of my algorithms, probably. Um, and I don't really think they were vindicated after the fact. My understanding is that there's been a slow, steady, reliable march towards, um, after a brief chaotic period of uncertainty, towards, COVID being, like coming from the wet markets and like from natural evolution as opposed to a lab leak. So yeah, I would say I'm not sure about this whole vindicated thing, but the that's mostly my media bias because I haven't actually looked into it independently.
I believe they were mostly vindicated, is my current understanding, but not totally. But other than yet, yes, mostly vindicated.
Okay. For mRNA vaccines, would you say that a lot of the conspiracies around it are probably not true at all, but that like there's reason to be concerned for some things, and mandating these things was definitely the wrong decision?
So I would agree. Yeah. So not. I don't really think there's any reason to. I think that most of the conspiracy stuff is total bull. Maybe all of it. As for reason to be concerned, I don't think that there's like educated reason to be concerned. Like if you know anything about vaccines, I can understand. Um, I think that it's reasonable for people with certain media environments to feel concerned, and especially since I mean most people wouldn't have very much idea about how vaccines work. I mean, me and myself, I mean, relative to people who do that sort of research for a living. I know also nothing, but I've done like health science degree and stuff like that. So, well, bachelor of exercise nutrition science, and then dietetics. I'm currently doing biostatistics, and I've looked into it a little bit. So, I understand it a little bit. And based on that understanding, I don't think it's reasonable, but I think that for some people it may be reasonable based on the media environments that they have, and whether or not they what they have or haven't learned about vaccines. As for whether it should be mandated, I'm honestly not sure if it should be mandated. Uh, yeah, I don't know where I come down on that. I can, and that's just because of the outsized, the incredible, like and I don't know to what extent this could have been predicted, but the enormous response from uh, the right wing, certain like sects of the right wing, where you've got all of this like now like vaccine skepticism going about now, and maybe in part that was due to it being made mandatory, but that's hard to track as well, whether it was as a result of it being mandatory or everything else that was happening at the time. So, um, yeah, I mean, like obviously, I think that they're safe and effective, as safe and effective as as normal vaccines, the mRNA technology ones. That'd be my perspective, I suppose.
Um, Mandating it was definitely the wrong decision. I'm actually, I want you to be right on the vaccine stuff. I know enough. There's plenty of people in my life who got the vaccine. I don't want them fucking dying. So
Okay.
I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. I think the lockdowns were bad in hindsight and done poorly. The fact that mRNA stuff.
That could be true, but also it probably depends on specific states, because there is a difference between, like he did say in hindsight, in like hindsight is 2020. I think there's a real reason for that saying, because we didn't know how the virus was going to evolve. So I think that there was reason for for being concerned and for wanting to put safety first. But that I think very reasonable, very rational excuse probably only goes so far. Um, uh, and then there's probably a point where you're like, oh, it's probably a bigger deal to have all the schools closed and for people not to be learning and that sort of thing. So I don't know exactly where that point is, and it's probably very context specific.
I still don't know what the evidence suggests about how safe it is. I got the J&J, and I personally would not get the mRNA. I would get if there was the J&J option, which was less effective but not mRNA, I would get that. That's what I did. Like,
Okay.
and I'm not certain that like when Brett Weinstein talks about the like you don't vaccinate during the pandemic, you vaccinate prior
that's
to a
fine.
pandemic.
Yeah. Do you think that
I don't know the validity of all that.
Do you think that it was broadly true that social media companies were cracking down on conservatives more than liberals, and this opinion was especially exemplified in the Twitter files?
I have no idea. I would guess yes, but I have no idea.
I saw your debate about it, so I'm a little bit more informed on that.
Oh,
I know.
okay. Fuck.
So
okay.
I think it was pretty even, right? Didn't the Trump administration request a bunch of stuff?
Okay. So you think it was
It is
even?
possible. Well, it is. Well, I don't know. It is possible that on balance, I don't know how you'd measure it objectively, but it was not as. It's not as
okay.
Clear as.
Do you agree that conservatives downplay Donald Trump's weaponization of the Department of Justice and the justice system for sure, because he is vindictive and he has gone after people. But the reason why conservatives downplay it is because the left absolutely weaponizes the Department of Justice as well, and that it's probably pretty bad on both sides, probably about equivalent, especially exemplified in the New York State charges against Trump, where they made up basically new felony charges to convict him of a crime that wasn't even really that bad. And there's probably been a ton of other crimes committed by presidents in the past that they haven't been held accountable for, but because of how politicized we are, we went after Trump now.
Okay, so it's kind of like, do they downplay it, the right, or does the right downplay how Trump and the right wing attempts to weaponize the legal system? Is that because of how the left has quote unquote weaponized the legal system, and is the does the left actually sort of weaponize it basically, or are they right to do what they do? And then he brought up a case there, as well as specific case. So, do they downplay it? Yes. Do is it like fair, or is it because of the left? It's certainly what they say. They say it's because of how the left um I reckon they'd probably downplay it anyway, but maybe more people download it. Like maybe the distribution of how much and how many people downplay it is shifted a little bit as a result of all the legal action against Trump. But I think they'd probably en masse that. My feeling is that they would downplay it anyway. And then, do I think that the left has sort of like unfairly gone after Trump? I don't think so. I mean, I've listen. I would say I'm not an expert, but I've actually watched a lot of legal videos, so I'm basically a lawyer. That's a joke. And I would say, from everything that I've seen, I don't see very convincing arguments at all to suggest that that Trump did not deserve to be gone after legally. I think that he is, it's my opinion that he is a criminal, and that he has done a whole lot of shit wrong, including the insurrection, attempted coup. I mean, the exact word that you want to use there, I'm not sure, but it was bad, on my opinion, is what I'm saying. And as for the specific case, I don't. That's a tough one. I don't know. I think. Yeah, I don't know about the specific case. I think that he clearly did crimes. He clearly did bad things. As for the extent to which something was invented or not, I don't know. And as for the extent to which it should be or should not be done, I don't know. And like, people bring up this thing, or they had to invent it, they had to do like this roundabout way of going about this, getting this conviction. But, and then they say, well, they haven't done that for other presidents. Um, and the thing to me is like, well, so what? Like maybe like you saying that therefore they shouldn't have done it for Trump, or that they should do it for other presidents. Because my point would be, if on the grounds of the case we think that Trump did something wrong, then the idea would be that they should do that for other presidents as well. But I don't know. So
That sounded good to me, what you just said.
Okay. Epstein was absolutely killed in prison by somebody who didn't want his list of things getting out.
I would
I have no idea.
say 85 to 90%.
Okay.
Not 100%. Can't be, but 85.
Okay. Let me think. I'm gonna try to do one more. Hold on.
It's like a BuzzFeed quiz.
Yeah.
What how centrist am I really? Yeah.
Fuck. Give me the Russian-Ukraine war is absolutely terrible. Russia absolutely shouldn't have involved Ukraine or invaded Ukraine. There's absolutely no justification for it. That's all definitely true. However, the fact that the United States is driving Ukraine on so much by providing weapons and increasing the likelihood of driving all of us towards World War III or some nuclear conflict makes it unacceptable for us to continue supporting them, and that we need to have found an off-ramp for peace already, or find one as aggressively as possible, even if it means Ukraine has to give some territory back to Russia. It would make the world better for everybody moving forward.
I mean, definitely, Russia should not have invaded Ukraine, and that's totally unjustifiable. As for whether or not we need to find an off ramp as quickly as possible and no longer continue supporting Ukraine, yeah, it's not intuitive to me that that's the case. Like, that it would actually be a good thing and that it would overall decrease the risk for something like a World War III or global conflict by now stopping. Because I think, I mean, the question that needs to be asked there is, what kind of signal is then sent to Putin and Russia's oligarchs and maybe even like unfriendly powers around the world that Russia seems to have gotten a lot of what they wanted from the conflict. Perhaps at not steep enough a cost, but some people would argue that they've already paid a steep enough cost to disincentivize any further action in the medium-term future, short to medium-term future, and then that would also be true of other countries around the world, I think. And then some people would bring up the point that they don't think that Ukraine could last much longer without help versus could, and all of that. So I don't know. I think it would need to be more context specific, but certainly my bias based off the media I consume is that we should continue to support Ukraine as long as they want to be supported and to continue with that endeavor. But of course, like I think peace would be the best outcome, but at the cost of as long as Ukraine wants to get their territory back, um, you know, based on my media bias, I would say that supporting them is a good thing in helping them do that and helping them maintain their sovereignty. But I can see other good arguments, I suppose.
I would agree with that.
Okay. Okay. Is there any other one? Is there any other one?
Hard. No, sorry.
Yeah. Is there any other one like thing that you would want to give me that you want to see if I can like try to print your opinion on? Give me like one other topic.
I think that on the whole, Destiny has gotten most of what Paul said right, but not everything. But I mean, there's definitely a trend there to him getting stuff right. But there's been some differences.
Like, or a big thing you think is important?
I don't really know how you're.
Oh, here's a. Do you think that when it comes to immigration, the Democrats are too lax on the border, and that even if the Republicans maybe have some like racist talking points every now and then, and they definitely see some things that aren't that great, we definitely need to crack down on immigration significantly, and the left has downplayed it far too much, especially when it comes to things like crime coming into the border or drugs coming into the border?
Yeah, I think we should grant a decent amount of amnesty.
I don't know. I don't know much about the border stuff.
So long as it's tied to essentially shutting down the border for at least some period of time.
Sure. Okay.
That doesn't include like in-process immigration and stuff, like people who applied.
Sure. Okay.
Visas, all that.
Okay. So I feel like my diagnosis is I feel like it reinforces the thing I said before, that I think that you are just entirely captured by like the media.
Entirely captured?
Environment that the right wing has created.
I don't know about entirely captured, but I mean somewhat captured, because like a lot of what he said is well, like the thing is, like right wing isn't the monolith, and so there are certain opinions in there that are more on the center right side of the aisle as opposed to the further right side of the aisle. I mean, some people on the right think that it was the US's fault that I think some people on the very far left think this as well, but it was the US's fault that Russia invaded Ukraine. So I don't know if I would say he's entirely captured by everything, but maybe there's like a certain part of the right wing ecosystem that he's captured by. But I mean, you could say the same thing about me and my ecosystem, though I do try to look at all sources, but you could say the same thing or something similar.
That a lot of your understandings of how the world works, of how government works, of how laws are passed, of the functions of all the things in society, epistemically, I feel like there's just been this huge capturing of the right-wing epistemology, that it usually relies a lot on underplaying or downplaying the accomplishments and the validity of institutional or structural things that exist. It often relies on dramatically overplaying the confidence of people that can just sell a message well. So it might be a billionaire, it might be somebody that shows up on social media a lot or different alternative media platforms that speaks well.
Or a famous online political streamer.
I feel like, that would be so my guess, that would be my diagnosis. And I would say that the solution for that assuming you don't have heroic, larger than life figures like me who single-handedly
Under the head.
reform the media landscape, it's boring, but it's like you just have to. I mean, obviously, this is my diagnosing you, right? So obviously, you can disagree with everything I'm saying, right? But obviously, like what you have to do is you have to step out of the passive media feed that you're in, meaning not just allowing algorithms or what you're used to
I like that phrasing, like step out the passive media frame that you're in. I like that.
watching to show you things because they're going to continue to reinforce this, and you have to like start fact checking things more aggressively. And fact checking doesn't just mean
It's probably true. I mean, I know that Destiny doesn't. I'm pretty sure it doesn't like ground news. I don't know why still, but I just feel like that's like a decent. Um, that feels like a potential antidote to this stuff as well. In fairness, I've not downloaded that ground news. I've only seen creators advertise it. So my opinion is based solely and entirely off of that.
mean looking for another podcaster talks about it, but like what we did earlier with Vivek, like, oh, what was being spoken about? Let's Google this. Okay, what was the federal government doing? Oh, okay. Well, what was the law? Oh, okay. Well, what is the structure of government? How did they pass the laws? Is okay, like that. That would be that process.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
Can I ask?
But
Because
that's-
everything you said, what did you say? It's not
All
like
of
you were
it. Every
stealing.
single thing I would disagree with. Every single thing I said. 100%. Yeah.
Every single thing he said. I think that Destiny does this sometimes, where he's very broad strokes in how he speaks and sort of imprecise, because sometimes he's set up like a hypothetical with like this and this and this. And, you know, when he says he disagrees with every single thing that he said, he must be talking about the combination of all of those things as like an overall um opinion. But like there are clearly some things within that the a few steps within that broader opinion that he would agree with, like the fact that like Russia is the aggressor in the case of Russia Ukraine, they shouldn't have done it, right? So I think that I am not the I mean far be it for me to criticize Destiny, a person who has let's see, how many subscribers does Destiny have? I think it's like 800 and something thousand, right? And me with 3 subscribers, 2 of which happened. I think they were like my friends from from like 10 years ago. Maybe, or maybe they're random people. I can't remember. Um, so he has, um, yeah, just a bit under 300,000 more subscribers than I do. So, um, uh, which is just to say he's blinded by his size, and he's not connected to the real world facts. But I would say he's maybe being a little reductive in saying that. Oh, and actually, wouldn't he agree on the Andrew Tate one? I can't remember the specifics of the Andrew Tate one, and I'm not going to go back and look. So,
What about the Andrew Tate thing? He's broadly negative, and he probably did do all the things. What was your
actually, wait.
of
The Andrew Tate thing, that might be like the only thing that I would agree with. Sorry, I forgot that one. Yeah.
I wish we wrote these down. I want to go back because everything you said sounded reasonable.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so let's go back from the beginning.
All right, Russia. Well,
the reason why I started with the Andrew Tate one is because the reason why I started with the Andrew no. The reason why I started with the Andrew Tate one is because my claim about right-wing media.
Man, I think I'm sort of coming up against my time limits here.
Is that there is a rigid buy-in on important key concepts, but at the peripheral, people are free to disagree on things that aren't really that important. And Andrew Tate and some of the stuff related to him, I believe, can kind of be one of those issues. So like another question that I would have asked and tried to predict is if I were to say something like, how do you feel about Donald Trump's character or behavior? I would have probably said, you think that Donald Trump's character and behavior, especially how he treats other politicians or whatever, is not really great. It's probably not something we should like exemplify, but like as the president, it's not really that important. Like if that he's like a great Christian or whatever. And people probably fixate on it too much is what I would have said for your answer to that.
I would say, yeah, it's probably, yeah. I mean, obviously, I don't like him or who he is. As for whether he's like a great Christian or not, I mean, like I'm not a Christian, so, um, but yeah, I don't know what he's getting at.
Maybe I'm not super
don't care that much about it. Yeah, sure. But that, like,
Yeah.
these would be like peripheral issues where I think there's some room for wiggling. And I think people delude themselves into thinking that, like, well,
Okay.
look, I can disagree. But then on things like for the immigration thing, right? I think that the immigration issue right now in the United States is almost entirely fictitious insofar as the problems are concerned.
So, because before I said that the right isn't a monolith, and I mean, like, people typically agree with that kind of sentiment, but maybe when Destiny refers to being captured by the right wing ecosystem, he does consider the right wing, and it was early in this conversation, I think, where he was talking about them being better at sort of in-group, out-group messaging, or was that in a different conversation? I can't remember. I think it was earlier. And so maybe what he's saying is that this right-wing media ecosystem that's captured Paul. I mean, while it's not an entire monolith, the ways in which it's not a monolith are kind of politically unimportant. And so, yes, while he may be somewhere along the spectrum there, not completely captured, if you were thinking about it in terms of um, like being aligned on every single opinion, the opinions and the things that he disagrees with them on are ultimately politically unimportant. Maybe that's the point that he's making.
That when conservatives talk about they're stealing all the jobs, they're not. Unemployment is incredibly low. They're bringing in record amounts of crime. That's not true. If it was, we wouldn't be talking about Lincoln Riley 8 months later. It would be different cases being brought up. And the idea that the issue is an open border is also not true. It's the asylum seeking process, which conservatives just don't talk about enough when it comes to fixing it. And the mass deportations that they're suggesting are fucking delusional. For the COVID lab leak stuff, that hasn't been validated at all. There's no new evidence supporting it.
I thought Robert Redford came out and said it was likely.
No, no
CDC
new
director.
All the research that has come out has been slowly moving in the direction of it was probably from the wet markets. There's been nothing out. All the two original studies that came out saying that it was probably lab leak. Both of those have been like nobody takes it serious anymore. So,
Okay,
those.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I'm just
So,
running down the disagreements, but yeah, but go ahead. You're going to do it. Yeah.
That's fair. Other than basically just listen to whatever you say, what should you said I should do more fact checking, but we agreed
Go listen to everything I say.
earlier. There's like, think of how stressful it was to go into all that fact checking for just one claim. We have to operate by heuristics. So aside from if Destiny says it must be true. Semi joking, but like, what other heuristics?
There's none. This is why I'm saying this is the.
I mean, there's none that's easy to communicate. Do I think there's none? I hope not. I think maybe it's the case that the solutions themselves, like the proposed heuristics, would be political, like, or at this point be seen as political, and so and that'd be problematic, right? Like, if it was side with the institution, and what side with consensus, broad scientific consensus, unless you have very good subject matter expertise related specific reasons not to. That'd be seen as kind of, I think, political at this point, because a lot of people on the right now make it a political point to say don't side with the science on things, and the people on the left say, hey, do side with the science. So maybe there are heuristics like that I probably do have, and a lot of people like do have, but are there any that sort of transcend politics and that can still be useful as heuristics? I don't know. So that is worrying. There would be some, of course, but like yeah, but save fact checking, which could be a good proxy for a person's uh, a person's eligibility as a good person to have your opinions outsourced to. Besides like fact checking stuff, I mean, like, there's general, because one thing, because I don't like when people get like really like angry and then like say people are stupid or whatever, which can sometimes happen. I think oftentimes happens in the same breath as good rebuttals. There can sometimes happen absent good rebuttals. I don't like that, but it's not to me necessarily a sign that this person doesn't know what they're talking about. But if somebody did that absent good arguments, or absent arguments that track the point, then maybe maybe the other one is being able to like track the conversation and keep on top of the conversation. Yeah, and so maybe there are some other things that relate to like good faith, but they're highly content context specific, I think. But I don't know, and I don't think I have the competence or the knowledge at this point in time to be able to articulate that well. So we're going to continue.
Issue is I don't know.
Fair.
Like even I ran into this where when I look something up, I was like, fuck, like I need to look this up. No, yeah, like I have to go back and look everything up. I don't trust anybody that says a thing anymore. I've got to go read the underlying material because I just don't trust anything that I read because the media environment is so poisoned and so horrible right now, and everybody's so detached from reality. I wish I had an answer for you where I'm like, oh, like just watch this media thing, just watch this.
I think ground news could be good, but why doesn't he like ground news? I don't know.
But the media apparatus right now is fucking deranged. It's terrible. That's
Well, so I'll tell you my, and then I'll 20 minutes, right? And then you're on your next person.
Yeah. Wait. Can you give me 15 seconds?
Go ahead.
Hold on.
More than 15 seconds. Don't trust that guy. Don't ever listen to anything he says politically. He just lied on camera with impunity. Is Paul going to say something? Oh. Here we go.
Okay. Hi.
Hello. All right. So this is my heuristic, and I would like to I would like you to tell me what you think.
Okay.
I will tell you what I think.
So here's how I see it. The world is infinitely complex. There is literally an infinite amount of facts
Yes.
that you could pay attention to.
Yeah.
The fundamental question is, how do we know which facts are most relevant to achieving the outcomes we want to
Yes.
achieve?
Mm-hmm.
And then assuming that you and I want a thriving, general, flourishing society. Okay. Because there is people that are outside of that value structure. But if that's a value structure we're in.
Yeah.
Because there's an infinite amount of facts, you basically need
Destiny, clearly an RFK Jr. fan here.
you need a team. You need a team composition, like in League.
Yeah.
Okay.
Agree.
You can't just have a tank.
I've played a little bit of League. I have a friend who was like a challenger player. He was at one point like number one for like 2 weeks or something in the Oceania server. It was back like 10 years ago or something. And so he taught me and some friends how to play. And man, the skill curve on that game is insane. I was in Iron. I got assessed. I was like Iron 3 or something like that, or Iron 2. I can't remember. And I played some games, and people were mean to me, and I was like, man, fuck this game. But then also it was taking up too much of my time, so it just wasn't a good use of my time. But I still do think it could be fun to like go back and get good because like it's an addictive game. But yeah, I think he's saying you need a variety of skills. Isn't there like a political thing? Isn't there like a political turn of phrase for that? Like diversity of I don't know, diversity of thought, diversity of skills, of methods. Um, but yeah, I can see that. And I think it's because if you don't have diversity, then your team is going to be vulnerable to the other team figuring that out and then taking advantage of you where you're weak. And so, for instance, if you had no people who were like debate bros who were debating on the left, then suddenly the right would start to fill that niche, and then they would have monopolized that niche. I think you actually saw this happen with. I mean, isn't that what like Gamergate is, right? I don't know much about these things. I wasn't like terminally online at that point in my life, but um, yeah, and like YouTube as well, where um, predominantly one side of the political aisle had taken advantage of a particular domain or however else niche, and therefore it became very difficult for the other side then to grab power back, and that could have to some extent shaped political discourse disproportionate to how it should have and how it would have if there was just more diversity in the strategy of the left at that time. But yeah, anyway, I'll let him talk.
Or you can't all be tanks. You could, but assuming you're matched with an even level team, the optimal team is a diverse team, right? Tanks,
Sure.
80 carries. Okay. So what you need is a significant number of people deeply doing the vertical dives that we just did about the archery thing into literally everything, basically.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be good at that or do it right. But then more importantly, we have to figure out how then do we know if, because I can never evaluate the methodology, right? So the heuristic is how do I?
You could. I mean, if that became transparent, maybe transparent methodology. Maybe that could be an interesting idea. Create a culture where your methodology for gaining knowledge is transparent. Yeah.
Do I know if someone is worth listening to generally? And my theory, which is a Jordan Peterson maps of meaning theory, the technical way of describing it would be, it'll sound ridiculous, but it's the more that someone embodies what is technically called the hero archetype, the more likely it is that we can trust them. And that what generally means is basically.
I don't have a precise understanding of what the hero archetype is, so I don't know.
I just look for who seems generally competent, generally good willed, good natured. That's a stupid way to say it, but
I mean, this could be like part of it. I don't think this should be the whole thing. And I don't know if he means to propose that it should be the whole thing. But I also think that, because one of the things I've been thinking about is how I think the right actually wears that as an aesthetic, much more so than the left. And so if you had that, like, let's say you had that as a heuristic, and I'm talking specifically about the portion of the hero archetype that he's talking about here, where somebody seems like, reasonable or open-minded, or what was it exactly that he said?
competent. Basically, I just look for who seems generally competent,
Generally competent,
generally good willed, good natured.
good-natured. Yeah, and so I think that the right can wear that sort of goodwill, good-natured attitude as an aesthetic, and that they prioritize that more than the left. Now, you could say that that's because they're more trustworthy and they're more credible, and so the heuristic is working. But I would say that it's more like they have, I think, I don't know exactly what it is. Is it because of some more fringe beliefs? But the far left has more fringe beliefs, but they don't necessarily. Um, that doesn't mean but they don't wear that as an aesthetic. They do the opposite sometimes. Um, but I would say that would end up being biased if at least what I'm saying is correct, which is that the right wing will use that as an aesthetic, which I think would impact, unfortunately, the reliability of that, of using that as a heuristic. But we will continue.
It's a stupid way to say it, but and the simplest way to say it is generally who do I vibe with when it comes to listening to? And I have a pretty wide range. I listen to I have a minor in gender studies. I listen to the most left-wing people on earth. I'll listen to Judith Butler. I'll listen to them explain their philosophies in an unchallenged environment. I'll listen to the far right and their white ethno-state, anti-race mixing stuff. Okay, and everything in between. And it is ultimately a vibes-based thing of like, well, this person makes sense on some things, blah, blah, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The key thing for me is who is most likely to it's kind of hard to say it, but it's like who is most likely to exploit divisions within their own tribe. And that's like the Joe Rogan, Charlie Kirk example. Charlie Kirk's voting for Trump no matter what. Joe Rogan could have in a very not in a somewhat different world, not that different. Joe Rogan could easily have voted for the left-wing candidate. And to me, that's an important distinction that says, and this is a bad because they all have their flaws. Any individual you do this for is going to have their flaws. But it's like like Joe Rogan is less of a tribal fucking sycophant than Charlie Kirk. And like Jordan Peterson prior to doing benzos and doing the Daily Wire and all this shit, like his lectures, you even said, I watched back our old conversation prior to this, and you said something like Jordan Peterson you like emphasize it, like he's an insanely curious person. Like you could tell, like in his lectures. Like that is like that's a fundamental thing. And like that, it's hard to describe. But like that, I see that in like Vivek. Or even like JD Vance to some degree. Now JD Vance lies to his fucking teeth. Okay, but again, I think that's a function of like there is no. I don't think any politician can be 100% honest on anything.
Yeah, I don't know, because like I mean I disagree with seeing that in Vivek. I don't see that in him. You know, I mean, if I do, it's only in like a superficial way, and most of what I feel like I get from him is not that. Um, I mean, it sounds like he's sort of in one breath he's saying that this is the solution he goes by, but is he sort of proposing this as a potential way forward for other people? And obviously, he's also said that it's difficult to communicate and put into words. And you know, I think that the analogy you put forward would apply here too, where it's like, well, what is a charismatic person, and how do you compare that to a non-charismatic person? You could like break things down, but at a certain point, it's just difficult to communicate. And I mean, I sympathize with that perspective, and you know, because even here we can see that I have different vibes for the same people, um, which is very interesting. So yeah, I feel like that there's got to be a way to, um, well, I hope there's a way um, to tinker with everybody's heuristics so that we can um, all be more on the same page. But I don't know.
Right? Like politicians have to lie. That's a function of democracy. Right? Because
It's
like what
not
is the
true,
truth?
but
Well, the
okay.
truth.
My God.
Really? Okay, well, but my broader point is, I think if you want people to agree with you, you need to. It will never be done through rational argumentation. Like the dialogue you and I are having,
Never purely.
I don't think is. It might convince people on the margins. Like there are some, like most of the people are either going to already agree with you, or some are going to agree with me. There's some in between who are like, this has actually changed my mind to some degree. The majority of people make up their minds on vibes and intuition. And I think your attitude is, and this is similar to Peter Boghossian's attitude, who reacted to one of my videos. He said this at the end that I disagreed with. He was like, we need to teach people how to be more like, to be able to rationally analyze and do these type of dialogues, which is true. We do need to do that. But fundamentally, it's more important. This is so fucking lame, but I believe it. It's more important to be a good person generally. Like be someone that people look up to. And like, and for example,
So I'm not sure I totally agree with the argument in terms of I think how it communicated, but maybe we'd have the same perspective here. But I think that it is important to, I mean, as he also said, it is important to teach people how to communicate and how to like follow the logical structure of an argument. And then he says it's more important to be a good person. And I think that um, depending on what exactly that means, I may even agree. Um, because like I can see it as being maybe even more important than being able to track an argument. Though I think they sort of work more hand in hand, but I certainly don't think that it's sufficient in and of itself to be able to track a logical argument. Um, but I could see it as more important to be able to look past. It's sort of like I guess it's maybe colloquially you could say be objective, but what does that mean to be objective? Well, I feel like a lot of the times where people aren't quote unquote being objective, it's probably because the ego is involved, and probably because um, you know, the person might feel like their identity is threatened by another perspective that's being put forward, and maybe their identity is better represented by what another party is saying. And so I think that that probably a lot of the time is what gets people to depart from being from like objectivism. Um, and so if you could teach people to not be so attached to identity and to care about other things and like stack things higher up in the sort of like more in their own internal sense of like what matters and what is meaningful, um, than a sort of static sense of identity. If you can, then I think, or something like that, maybe, then I think that you have a very good recipe for somebody who will be objective as much of the time as we could expect a human being to be objective. So being able to follow logical argumentation and then not being so attached to some kind of identity that they're going to look past what's being said in front of them.
The reason me and many people listen to you, is like because like you clearly are able to demonstrate good humor. You're funny. You can have these.
I thought about that, about like how much I want to integrate humor into what I do here, and I think I probably do. Um, I do want to do it. At first, it's a bit weird because I want to be, and like this is part of my identity. I want to be like precise in my speech, and I want to be correct, and I want to be parsimonious, and all of that sort of thing. And then, and humor, you're often not being like the most parsimonious. So, yeah, there's a bit of a conflict there, but I think I want that to be part of what I do, and I think maybe that'll come with time as well as it becomes more natural for me to be on camera and for me to speak my thoughts, and as I become more comfortable.
Type of dialogues. It was aggressive earlier, but like you said, like, hey, I'm in debate mode and blah blah. So there's like, because obviously when you're in fucking Mr. Borelli mode, it's psychopathic and scary, and I would say that's the fucking. My advice, worth nothing, would be to the best of your ability, try not to revel in people's deaths. But it's not like a hot take you haven't heard before. But like, that is the most important thing for generating the charisma, which then unconsciously causes people to want to believe in what you have to say, independent of your rationalizations for it.
Okay. So,
And
we're here. Can I ask some questions? Or go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, that's why I said we're getting into the details too much at one point. And I didn't mean details are not important. I meant it felt like the level of analysis is now so granular that it does ultimately come down to a vibes-based thing at that point. And we might as well have just leaned on a vibes-based heuristic at the top.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? What do you think of fuck, in a simple sense? Anti-intellectualism is based. Fuck policy. Go with vibes.
Well, so here's the question, okay?
Yeah.
I don't know where his true opinion ends and the joke begins.
You said you're 28, 29?
I'll be 28 in exactly 1 week. Or 2.
Okay.
1 week. Ish.
Have you ever bought a car before?
Yes, it's sort of like irony joke. Yeah.
I bought it from my parents.
From your parents?
Yeah.
Do you know anything about buying cars or talking to car salesmen?
I've gone with them to, when we were doing that in high school or in college.
When you look at a car salesman, what are the reputations that they have? Like, how do people view them, like, morally?
Easy.
Yeah.
They'll say anything.
Yeah.
Surface level charm, snake oil salesman.
Absolutely. When you watch a car salesman interact with a customer, what do they look like?
Sleazy?
Do they?
I don't know. I don't have much experience with it. I mean, I'm assuming, like, you can have false charm. I've talked to people who,
yeah, they're salesmen,
like
right?
Salesmen. Yeah.
Yeah. They don't come off as sleazy. They come off as honest. They come off they try to come off as honest,
Correct.
personable, funny, understanding, caring, right? If I were to go to a Honda dealership and I wanted to buy a car, would I trust that salesman to tell me the pros and cons accurately of having a Honda?
It's probably not.
Probably not, right?
But maybe, I don't know, because you could argue that the most effective sales tactic is to be honest with someone.
Do you
They're
think that's
good
true, though?
salespeople.
If that was true, would salesmen have the...
It's probably true, like, across time, but like there's in the moment there's like expedient lies I think that can often be told. But then across time, in terms of like developing your reputation, it's best to be seen as somebody. It's best to tell the truth because then you'll develop credibility in that space. But I think the difference between a car salesman in this example and, say, for instance, politicians, I don't know exactly where Destiny is taking this, is that politicians' claims, I mean, there's some extent to which they can be validated in this, but oftentimes that doesn't get to the people because of how the media environment is. But then also sometimes claims are a little more like counterfactual, like, oh, if you did this instead of that, then this would have happened, and then it's rhetoric based again. But you could never tell because if you were to implement that thing later, maybe it's bad. I mean, this and Trump does this all the time. I honestly don't know how many people believe him. Whereas like this is Biden's economy, this is because of all the bad things that Biden did, as opposed to the the tariffs and everything that he's doing now. So um, yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that for whatever reason, and maybe it's media environment related, as Destiny said, but this salesman will benefit. That their credibility benefits, I think, more from being consistently honest than maybe a politician's does because of how easy it is to across time tell who was being honest and who wasn't. Would be my thought.
A
Well,
commission-based job where they have the
I see.
reputation of being
Yeah, I see what you're
slimy.
saying. I like low-level sales. That's less likely to be the case. It's just volume.
Or anywhere, because you said yourself, right, that politicians are like have to lie, right? That was your own.
Yeah, which I'm surprised
Right.
I'm surprised you disagree with.
Sure. Oh, there's varying degrees, but that's not relevant. But I'm just saying you think that.
Okay.
So a car salesman, it's a commission-based job, right? So chances are people are going to emulate the best tactics. Lying to some extent, right? Probably is good. So we agree we probably don't trust the Honda salesman to give us the best drawbacks of the Honda cars, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the level 1 idiot would tell you, well, he's a salesman, he knows everything. He's going to give us the pros and cons, right? Level 2 might say, okay, well, I don't trust the Honda salesman. I'm going to go get more opinions. And let's say that he goes across the street to the Ford salesman. Do you think that the Ford salesman is going to give you an accurate cons to driving a Honda?
No, he'll probably over-exaggerate.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he's playing the same game, he's just on a different team.
Yes. So you go to the Carfax. You say, "Show me the Carfax."
Correct.
Incentive removed.
Yes. So the issue that I have when people are like they're centrist and they listen to a bunch of different media, why would I think that a person could give me the pros and cons of any vehicle just because they've spoken to a different car salesman? I wouldn't expect you to know anything about the negatives of driving a Honda just because you spoke to somebody trying to sell you a Ford. Obviously, he's going to be over-exaggerating everything there. And the Honda guy is going to be talking his car up as much as possible. And, he's going to tell you probably over-exaggerate what's wrong with Fords, right? Mm-hmm. I think that what we need in society is we need something like a Carfax. And, like, what does a Carfax do? When you're reading a Carfax, is it going to be telling you, like, this car is exhilarating? This car makes you feel full of life. This
Definitely not what you want there.
car makes you feel like a real American hero. What's on a Carfax?
It's like miles and all
It's
that.
autistic, boring, in the weeds, discreet. Like, here's the VIN, motorcycle accident, 2017, repair shop, oil changes. Like, oh my God, who cares? But we like Carfax because they are accurate and they have a history, a record of.
So is this his criticism of ground news as well? I don't know if I fully take it on board myself. I think that, he said that he doesn't know why you'd expect somebody who went to both those car salesmen to be able to tell you anything about, for instance, the Honda. But I do think they'd be able to tell you things about it within certain limits. They might not know the exact details, but they'd be able to say, hey, here are the limits that have been set up, and then here's maybe why I go more towards one side or the other based on like inconsistencies or if there's any incongruencies in the stories of the two car salesmen or something like that. So I don't. That being said, I think the Carfax thing is a good idea to like if it could be implemented, it's great. But But yeah, I don't think necessarily. I mean, unless that the salesmen are like completely lying, but I wouldn't expect them to be completely lying, because there are incentives against that. Um, over the long term, obviously, as a business, that way you're trying to build credibility. I think that there is legitimacy to going to different sources. Maybe he's not trying to make the argument that there's no legitimacy to going to these different sources, but um, I think that relative to how I would phrase it, I think he's downplaying it a bit, the benefits. But I do take the point that it's maybe it's not sufficient in a scalable way, even though an individual might be able to um, mediate that either by chance or by skill or experience or whatever.
Accountability. Go ahead.
That's not what sells cars. It's the salesman telling you it'll make you thrilling and it'll make you cool and it'll get you women.
Yeah. So the issue is what has to happen is in a world right now where the Carfax is really fucking boring. What I need, what I want, what I would want to be, or I would have a media company doing, whatever. I don't know. That's what I'm trying is I need a really entertaining, funny person to be the guy that's selling the Carfax. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I want somebody to do or be. And I don't see that. Yeah. But right now in the world, it's just a bunch of car salesmen that are selling their own cars. And then people trying to tell me why their car salesman is better than the other car salesman. But at the end of the day, anything that they tell me about that car salesman, like, well, this guy is incentivized to lie about the seatbelt safety in his car, or causing wars like the military industrial complex, well, that other guy could be lying about, the seatbelts in his car, or it could be a billionaire who owns, companies that sell weapons of war. I need more people that are willing to go to the actual raw data, analyze it, and then dump it into the public in a way that's entertaining, that people like to watch. That's like that's a very, very difficult thing to do. And when you talk about what makes a good salesman, all of those things that make a good salesman, these are the things that a liar looks to emulate, right? If you've ever known a good manipulator, okay, a good BPD girl, a good narcissistic man, or whatever, these people don't meet people on first impression. Oh, I fucking hate you. Oh, you fucking horrible person. Nobody manipulates a person that way. Nobody gets obsessed with a person that way. The obsessive part is always when we first met, it was magic and they used to be so wonderful and whatever. At the very least, bombing. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Love bombing is one of the most important parts, right? You can't just hate bomb somebody constantly. Nobody would be obsessed with you. Everybody would just fucking hate you, right? Nobody knows a manipulator who's like, oh, that guy who smells weird all the time and always calls people racial slurs. No, they're going to be the guy that's really nice to you sometimes in private, right? Yeah. Sure. So the only issue that I have, all this to say, it was a long way of basically saying, the only issue I have with your heuristic is that while it can be a good heuristic for detecting honest actors, those are exactly the types of heuristics that dishonest actors are looking to exploit, and you have to figure out some way to differentiate between
Solid point.
Between the two, and it can't just be
solid point. And it hits on what I was saying before about the right wing wearing it as an aesthetic, but that was much better articulated. Very solid point.
They are charming, they are charismatic, and they're doing, the way that they present themselves, they seem so earnest, because that's exactly what a con man does, right? Con men are not, nobody says oh, wait, well, one of the weird things about Hitler, to do the Vosh thing, right? One of the weird things about Hitler is in all of his speeches, he was such a loser and nobody liked listening to him talk, and man, he was just so unpopular, but somehow he became the leader, right? It's always the exact opposite. So that's what you have to work on, is how do you differentiate between the two? And that comes down to some raw accounting of fact, right? What are the predictions that these people made? Do they have a record of making good predictions? Are they doing good analysis on this particular problem? If we look up the facts, the Carfax, does it actually match the things that they're saying? And so that's what we kind of did with Vivek here, is we pulled the Carfax. Okay, well, he's saying these stuff about the Department of Education. Do they match 100%? Varying degrees or whatever, but that's not really satisfying, but it's just a thing.
No, that's fair. I take a fundamentally not because I'm qualified to, but I take a psychological approach to things. I evaluate my actions and my beliefs through what are my motivations.
I really like the qualifiers that Paul gives, and I think more people should do that. And maybe I think that should be a heuristic, that the number of qualifiers a person gives, when they're talking about a topic that is, that maybe they don't have a lot of proven expertise and don't have a lot of expertise in, or that maybe an unfalsifiable topic. A lot of the time I hear people talking about these concepts in politics. It's this is the way that this is, when in reality it's maybe you think that maybe they think that it's better to take that point of view, but they don't actually have good evidence that this is definitely the way that it is, because a lot of politics and a lot of theories in politics are very, I think, difficult, sort of unfalsifiable in a way, difficult to empirically study, um, convoluted at the very least, and requiring domain-specific expertise that, um, maybe even in like statistics and that sort of thing. So, yeah, maybe qualifiers, like the extent to which somebody gives appropriate qualifiers, and then the question is, what's an appropriate qualifier? But as a starting point, the extent to which somebody gives it adequate qualifiers, maybe as a heuristic for that person's honesty, at the very least, though not necessarily credibility on a subject, because though it would be related, right? But you could have a person who gives tons of qualifiers because they don't know anything, like me. Um, and then you could have a person who gives the appropriate qualifiers based on their level of knowledge. So, yeah, we'll. That's all just to say. I like when Paul qualifies things, and I like him as a guy.
Blah blah blah, whatever. And I think that's why long form discussions are useful. But like I said, the most interesting thing about the only interesting Trump interview I've ever heard is where he talked about his brother momentarily, like having alcoholism. Like, okay, that's a human being there. I mean, you have all your like, your drama arts and all that. Like you was, I don't even know what percent would you say. Probably in the last year it's been more, but like since your streaming career, what percent is like intellectual stuff versus like?
So I started Vyvanse, it's probably like
drama
95% like this intellectual shit. But
oh, is that what it is? Is that what shifted it?
I started Vyvanse last year, yeah. So I haven't done any drama.
Okay, well, like obviously.
But I know what you mean. I'm personable, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've seen a lot of like the drama stuff, and like I have, in my opinion, I have a reasonable enough, or not reasonable, a functional enough guess as to where your weaknesses are in terms of like I'm like I'll just be honest with you, like I try, like we've only talked twice, but like I'm trying not to get in debate mode with you, because I do think that limits the conversation of at least what I'm trying to get to, like these underlying, because it's not really a debate about like, I guess it's a debate in terms of like which general heuristic is correct versus like what is the fact of the matter on this specific thing. Right? That's
true.
A different approach.
Can I ask? I'm just curious. Can I ask? Have you ever been in a long-term relationship before?
Yeah.
Have you ever been in a bad relationship before?
No, there's only been one, and it was amicable.
One of the annoying things about a bad relationship.
I've definitely had, well, not. I was gonna say I've had bad relationships with people before.
Sure. One of the annoying things about bad relationships or bad friendships or bad whatever is that somebody will come at you with a feeling they have about a thing. They'll say, "I feel like you lied about." You lied about when you were going to come home last night. Okay, you said you're going to be home by 6, and you weren't home until 6:30. And let's say that you, while you were coming back, let's say you got a flat tire, legitimately, right? And you did. You took a fucking picture of the cop helping you change the tire, whatever.
I think I remember watching Destiny say this in a stream once, where he was like, "It's not lying if, it's not lying if it's not like." Even if what you said doesn't end up being true, it's not lying if you consider yourself to be telling the truth at the time, but you just didn't have omniscience. Yeah.
Doing whatever, right? You have all this. And let's say that eventually goes to the point where you show up in front of friends or a therapist or a third party, whatever. You just want to we need somebody to settle this disagreement. She keeps saying I'm lying, right? An issue that you're going to run into is that when you're fighting on the vibes of a thing, or you're fighting on a heuristic of a thing, maybe she's been cheated on in the past, maybe you have lied in the past, whatever. When you're fighting on the vibes of the heuristics, at some point in the conversation, you're going to have to dip into this world where you're like, okay, bitch, hold on. You said that I lied about coming home and that this didn't happen. We need to look at the fucking pictures. We have to consult the facts at some point. Because the reality is that you and her and any third party, therapist, friends, whatever, can go back and forth on that conversation for hours. You can have the long form podcast, you can have the long form discussions, the conversations, the tweets, whatever, and you might never actually hit that fact of the matter. And without getting there, what does any of the conversation matter? Because everybody's got a heuristic or a vibe based on the facts that they believe to be true. And that's just a really rough.
See, that's the exact opposite of what I think. It's like the fact.
Because I would agree with what Destiny said there. I think that you need to pick your moments, and I think maybe like not all battles need to be fought. Like you don't always need to get to the ground truth of things, but in the scenario that like Destiny set up just then, um, it makes like there are going to be times where that's going to be, I think, a useful enterprise to embark on. You know, what are the facts of the matter? Um, like I think definitely that's the case. Like, but you know, like they work together, right? Like the vibes and then the facts of the matter. I would think.
Fact of the matter is utterly irrelevant. It's like if you have a
What? Surely not in like the um, you know, like I mean to steel man before he says it. Um, like if you've had like an altercation maybe with like a person you're in a relationship with or like a friendship or something like that, I think that there are going to be times where it's kind of like, look, we both got heated or I got heated or something like that. Um, it's not worth going over and relitigating all of the facts of the matter. But what I'm going to say is, moving forward, I'm going to do this, and like, I love you. Let's come and hug, or that sort of thing. We're gonna work through this, and you sort of reestablish trust in a kind of vibes-based way, as opposed to digging into what actually happened. But I think that there are going to be scenarios where it's important to dig into what actually happened. Yeah, I mean that's certainly true. I think in my experience, and I would think that Paul thinks that too. So I'm curious to see where he's going.
like a healthy couple can withstand all kinds of like you said you're gonna get home at 6 and you got home at 6:30.
Mhm.
It's like the only reason that becomes an argument is because all of the underlying stuff that's not addressed, and the fact of the matter is irrelevant. Now I'm also saying this
Oh
from
fuck! I almost agree with you 1,000,000%. But I would say that it's because all the underlying stuff wasn't addressed, which are the facts of the matter, right? Because it feels like what happens is when people especially in a relationship, when two people have a massive blowout fight, it's basically never going to be the case that they're having a massive blowout fight from nothing. Usually it's the case that a whole bunch of little issues have stacked up over time that have accrued in such a way that it accumulates into a huge problem that leads to a blow up, and they didn't address all the little things along the way.
yeah.
Yeah. But like,
also,
so for instance, like
yeah, go
Vivek
ahead.
saying that like the Department of Education is a horrible thing. And I'm like, well, it was a law from Congress. In the grand scheme of things, and I even said back then, this isn't probably like the biggest thing in the world. But if you've peppered 1,000 or 1,000,000 of these little facts out, and then we go to have a big disagreement about like, well, we're going to abolish the Congress or abolish the Department of Education. Well, now it's like, hold up, this is so bad and dumb. But in your mind, you've already seen so much evidence for why it would be a great idea to do it. In my mind, none of that evidence has been presented. And none of those little fights happened along the way. Yeah, which is why I think that being like the debate bro, like there's actually like a happy medium of fighting for a good relationship. If somebody says, "Oh, we've never fought ever," like that's kind of a red flag. Either somebody's like holding a lot of resentment, or you're like 1 in a trillion, right? And a couple that's like we fight all the fucking time or whatever, right? Okay, well that's probably not good. But there's a couple like, oh yeah, we always, sometimes we'll fight over like dishes or every whatever, it happens or whatever. But like we're happy, we move on. That's good. There's not resentment building up. You're resolving things. It's being able to fight in a healthy manner is really healthy, really good. Yeah.
I agree 100%. This is the more, for what it's worth, this is the more interesting type of conversations about general philosophy, psychology stuff. So next time we talk at some point, we can go into this. I will not trigger you with Vivek and.
Well, sure, but then the only reason
Tulsi
why
Gabbard too, by the way.
I'm sure you do. But the only reason why
I do.
I like having this conversation now, okay?
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't like this conversation without what happened before, is because now when I say we have to sort out all those little facts before, I know that in your mind, you're thinking like, oh yeah, like I need to educate Destiny on trans healthcare and all blah, 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 blah. And I might be thinking like, oh, I need to educate PF Jung on, what actually happened in Ukraine and Russia. And we're both sitting here like agreeing with each other, like, oh yeah, like a couple agreeing like, oh yeah, like yesterday you were really horrible to me, weren't you? And the other guy's like, maybe, yeah, but you were horrible to me. It was really bad, right? And they might be thinking of totally different ways that they were each mistreating each other. They have no idea what's going on. And yeah, that's why I think that the generalized I'll say masturbatory conversations of like, oh, like let's all agree on these broader macro things or whatever. It doesn't matter until you get down to a reducible fact of the matter of like, well, what actually happened here? And then once you've done the diagnosis on the individual things, then you can broaden it. It's like, okay, well, let's talk about what does it mean to be a snaky car salesman or whatever. Now we're grounded a bit more, but that's how yeah.
That's fair. I would say just that we can.
As I listen to people who have been doing streaming for much longer than I realize how far away from the skills ceiling I actually am, and but I look forward to the work. I look forward to doing more.
dovetail into the next conversation
But I'll finish off this video.
we have is like,
Sure.
what happens when there is no fact of the matter? Like, what happens when, it's there's a terrible way to end this. Let's say, like,
Mm-hmm.
there are obviously like accusations of sexual assault that do not meet the criteria of full-on sexual assault, because they weren't true or something like that. But like, there are many situations that are so fundamentally complicated, and people that thought they were on the same page that were not. It's like, what is the fact of the matter on anything? It's like, my worldview is that there's a way less fact of the matter things than we think, and we have to be able to navigate that.
Okay, my worldview is there's way more fact of the matter. Almost all of it is fact of the matter stuff.
Schizo?
Autism, I guess. But I'm right,
All right.
though, so.
That's
Okay.
fair. Thanks again. I'll talk to you in a few
Good stuff. Um,
weeks or a month or so.
Okay, I love you. Be careful.
Godspeed. Peace.
good
At
stuff.
GYG, we only serve.
That was fun. I enjoyed that. I want to do more of that. Yeah, I think it's going to be good picking up this skill over time. I want to have an actual session where I sit down and I plan out the type of content that I want to create, because I do enjoy talking about this politics stuff, but I also really enjoy topics related to like nutrition science. That's like my education background, and maybe philosophy of mind, like meditation stuff, Buddhism stuff, and yeah. So I don't know exactly how I'm going to like niche down yet, and but we'll figure it out with time, I think. But thank you for watching. For anybody out there who did, right now, how many people have we got in stream? We have 0 people in stream. So thank you for watching. PF Young, if you end up watching this, well, thank you for watching, and I hope I get to talk to you at some point. So that's it for now.